They all had shadows under their lashes. All seemed distinctly other. That's like describing me when I'm running on 2 hours of sleep. It's not distinct. What do you mean they all seem distinctly other? It might seem like it's poetic, but it's giving nothing. Descriptions like this rely on the reader's imagination more than the author providing the description. We also have a lot of telling instead of showing. The bane of my existence. Hello, welcome to Vivi's Book Club. Today we are talking about Dream by the Shadows by Logan Carley. Dream by the Shadows was independently published on September 12, 2023, and traditionally published by Christie Ottaviano Books on August 26, 2025. The ebook and audiobook were published by Headline. Please note that this video contains spoilers. There won't be a separate spoiler section. So if you're planning to read the book and you don't want any spoilers, please don't watch the video. So let's start with the description. Enter the perilous realm of the Shadowbringer, a world filled with heart-stopping adventure, monstrous curses, and a romance carved from the darkest of shadows. In the kingdom of Noctis, dreams are deadly and darkness reigns. Esmer Havenfall's life is defined by loss and curses. Her sister is dead, her future is bleak, and demons that prey on their dreams tormented her village. When a devastating mistake sends her to the tomb of the Devourer, where the Shadowbringer reigns, Esmer must confront the darkness within herself and the monster she must work with to survive. The Shadowbringer's realm is a harsh and unforgiving place. His magnificent castle is crumbling, and demons lurk around every corner. But partnering with the Bringer also gives Esmer freedom and power, and as her feelings for the Bringer grow, drawing her closer to the deadly truth behind his past, she realizes that true darkness is more familiar and more nefarious than she ever dreamed. Torn between the thirst for freedom and a purpose greater than themselves, Esmer and the Shadowbringer must decide whether to confront or succumb to the darkness that threatens to consume them both. Be careful what you dream of. I read this book because I was expecting a dream realm that is a combination of the Fade from Dragon Age and the Dreaming from The Sandman on Netflix, with the Shadowbringer being sort of like a Morpheus character. For the most part, I think the synopsis does not accurately reflect what happened in the book. The devastating mistake that was referenced was more like a dumb decision made by our protagonist Esmer, and the darkness within herself wasn't an important internal struggle like the synopsis made it out to be. I'm actually unclear what Esmer confronted about herself. There's a lot of moments in this book that I just wasn't sure what was going on or what was trying to be told to me. I'll get to that later. So let's start with the characters. Esmer is our protagonist. She lives in a desolate village in the middle of the woods where her parents are absolvers, capital A, meaning they are in charge of distributing elixirs to the villagers. We're told early on that Esmer indirectly caused her sister's death by convincing her to dream with her. Therefore, the sister got possessed by a demon and she succumbed to this corruption, capital C, and eventually she was taken care of. Esmer's strongest personality trait is that she loves her brother. Generally, she loves her family. She would do almost anything to protect her family. The other thing that is hammered in about her personality is that she really feels guilt about what happened with her sister Eden 5 years prior. In the beginning, Esmer is a curious person, as seen by her wanting to experience a dream. In some flashbacks, she also often talks about wanting to travel, wanting to see more of her world. So there's that curiosity, a bit of a, not wanderlust because it's not that strong. There's curiosity and a thrill to explore her world. That curiosity disappears quickly, though, as the book goes on. She is also stubborn, as shown through her unwillingness to question what was taught to her as a child. Namely, that the Shadowbringer is the source of all the corruption and the ruler of the demons. She has that strong belief throughout the book, even when she's presented with proof of the contrary. She stubbornly clings to that to the point of frustration on my end because it doesn't feel like a part of her character anymore. It's not just Esmer is a stubborn person. It's more like this character can't be convinced of the truth or an alternate story because then that would ruin the sequence of the plot. So I found her worldview, the Shadowbringer is the source of all evil, blah blah blah. I find it forced and lacking because this is repeated throughout the book, that Shadowbringer is the cause of all the corruption. He controls the demons. He's the reason why people are getting possessed. But there's no explanation, no lore about how he made this happen. They say that he's the source. Okay, how did he do that? How is he controlling the corruption? There's no lore about that. There's no mythos. We're just told that he is the reason. We also don't know what is enforcing this belief. There's no distinct religious or governmental structure that enforces this idea. What are the consequences of not believing this? What happens to the people who questioned the Shadowbringer's involvement? Do people even question that? I don't know. It's not really explained, or it's not shown through the world building. So it just creates a lot of questions like, why does everyone believe this? What makes Esmer so resistant to thinking outside of this belief? Like, what makes her so resistant to accept other information, like alternative mythos or lore or any explanation? Without all this groundwork, Esmer reads as simply lacking critical thinking. I don't mean that as it's part of her character, but more like she needs to lack critical thinking so that the tension between her and the Shadowbringer can be extended. We need her to be enemies with the Shadowbringer. We need that tension between them until like 70%, 80% of the book. Okay, I went off a tangent there, but that's Esmer. And then we have the Shadowbringer, aka Erebus. So Erebus is a Shadowbringer. It's not clear what he is until the end, but even that means nothing because there is no context of what creatures are in this world and what their role is in this dream realm. Is he a dreamer because he can control his dreams? Is he an apprentice because the weavers, capital W, invited him to train in the dream world? Is he a weaver himself because he has his own domain that he rules? What is a weaver? All those terms are not really explained through context, but they get repeated throughout. Esmer would say, weaver this, weaver that. We get names and descriptions of weavers, but at the same time, they rarely function or interact with the world, so you don't understand what their role is exactly. Are they what you call mages? Are they gods in a way that the Greek gods are? Later on, I will list out a couple of the weavers and what they rule over. For me, it's not very clear what their role is in this universe, how they interact with the dream realm, how they interact with the waking world, and everyone who lives between those two realms. Erebus is a stereotypical scary, grumpy love interest with shadow powers, but of course he is actually just a misunderstood victim. We're told later in the book that he actually doesn't remember what happened to him, how and why he got trapped in his castle. It doesn't even explain either why his castle is crumbling. I am not sure. I have this vague feeling that the gist is his powers is weakening. That's the idea that I got reading between the lines, because Esmer was there to amplify his powers. There is a lack of clarity in the world building, in the consequences, the risks, the stakes, the objective, which makes this story not grounded. I'll go into detail about that later on. We have Elliot. Elliot is Esmer's younger brother and her only living family throughout the book. He is there to be leverage for the antagonist to use against Esmer. I liked the relationship between Esmer and Elliot at the beginning because I felt for this situation. Their sibling died fairly recently, and then at the beginning of the book, we see their parents get possessed and eventually purified. It's just the two of them, and then so much is going on between them. So I did feel for them at the beginning. Before the start of the book, Elliot got sick because he was also having secret dreams. He almost dies because of this. He almost got fully possessed. Elliot doesn't remember what his dreams were. He doesn't remember what it's about, what he saw, but from what we're told, it wasn't good. Elliot is basically the emotional anchor that drives Esmer's decisions until Elliot is taken away and doesn't appear on page again. Okay, so we have the main antagonist, the Lightbringer, Mithras Atrel Tethbrum. Tethebrum. Tethbrum. He is Noctis's sovereign and Lightbringer. I don't know exactly what a Lightbringer is, what makes someone a Lightbringer. Are they a mage? Are they a god? They don't say. The book does not explain what exactly a Lightbringer is, but we can guess by the name, except there are other ways to interpret this. Does he wield light or fire? What does his power do? Does he just light up? Does he shoot superheated light beams from his hand? What are the limits of his powers? Is he the only light bringer? Is he a religious or military figure? Maybe both. Who does he work for? From what is shown and told, the gist of this character is that he is a knight of some sort. I thought of him as like a paladin or a Dragon Age Templar, where they serve this religious institution that worships the Maker, and their main goal is to hunt and eliminate demons. The Templars are more complicated in Dragon Age, but that's a different story. So what is clear about Mithras is that his goal is to keep the demons away at any cost. Yeah, so he's very fanatic almost about purifying souls and defeating the Shadowbringer and ending the corruption. There's a lot of mirroring with Christianity there, especially regarding the purification of souls and the idea of being corrupted by evil, destroying your soul if you're not cleansed. In the middle of the book, the Shadowbringer says Mithras is not a lord, because Esmer refers to him as Lord Mithras, which raises more questions about the hierarchy of this order that he belongs to. They are called the Light Legion. Is that like an arm of whatever religion they have, or a militaristic governing body? It doesn't get explained either. So those are the main players. Now let's talk about the plot. So in chapter 1, the book opens up with a funeral. So Eden, Esmer's sister, got possessed by a demon over the course of the month. Before she was put to the ground, the Light Legion came into the village and questioned the family. It's unclear if there's an outpost of Light Legions in the village, because in the beginning it does mention that they're in the middle of the woods. Their village is kind of out of the way. So is there an outpost of Light Legionnaires close by, or do they have to travel from the capital? I don't know, it's unclear. Throughout the beginning chapters, there's just a lot of vague world building that makes me feel like I'm just floating in this empty space, because I can't picture this world that the author is trying to build. The Light Legion does this Inquisition thing. They question everyone, and we are told that Eden's symptoms are she stole a dress, destroyed her elixirs, tried to suffocate Esmer while she was sleeping, and she ate a live rat. She was locked up in the village's holding cells, specifically there to imprison the corrupted. The Light Legion came in, questioned the family. It's not explicitly stated, but the implication there is the Light Legion purified Eden. I'll explain that later. After the opening chapter of the funeral, Esmer goes to bed and she cries herself to sleep. And then we get a flashback of the night Esmer convinced Eden to dream. She wanted Esmer to not take the elixir. So the elixir doesn't have a name. They just call it elixir. We don't know what it's made out of, but we are told that it's the same color as cider. Esmer says you need 1 or 2 mouthfuls before you go to bed so that you won't dream. So every time you go to sleep, you take 1 or 2 mouthfuls. They describe the elixir as being in vials. I'm imagining a vial is, they're not big, they're vials. If you go bigger, then that's a bottle. Let's say 7 mouthfuls for a week's worth of dose. I would assume you need more than a vial, because that's a bottle now. It's not a vial. I'm bringing this up because we have this vague rules that are put in place in this world. Maybe it'll make more sense as I go through the summary of what happened, but just mentioning it now, I just realized that the vials and the doses don't even make sense. Okay, so we are flashbacking to the night that they first dreamed. Esmer's reason for wanting to dream is basically curiosity. She wants to experience how to fly, how to do all these things when you're in a dream. Anything can happen in a dream, right? So she's very curious to see this, and she wants Eden, her sister, to go with her. Eden is the older sister. Eden is more cautious, more rational, more mature. There's a plot point here where Esmer always compares herself to Eden. She's the dull one while Eden is the beautiful one. Eden is smarter. Eden is the perfect daughter while she's grubby and not that beautiful. It's just dull. That comes up a few times, and then it doesn't really follow up in the later chapters once we get to the dream realm. So I don't even know why that was brought up. Well, I'm guessing it's part of the guilt, but at the same time, it just feels out of the blue, and then it feels inconsequential once the book basically forgets about it. So while Esmer is trying to convince Eden to not take the elixir, Elliot comes in to ask them to read a bedtime story, which I find cute. Basically, this whole scene is just an info dump about the Weavers. And by info dump, I mean they look at a book, they flip through the pages, they point at illustrations, and they say, oh, this is that, this is that. They don't even tell a story. More Dreamweaver stories? He nodded, squeezing the book to his chest. Was thinking the one where Nephthys saves the sea dragon from a nightmare, or when Lelantus teaches dreamers how to fly. Sorry to interrupt. That dialogue, it tries to give information, but the way it's delivered sounds very info dumpy. It sounds expository, but at the same time, it doesn't really give any information. Nephthys saved the sea dragon from a nightmare. Does that say what or who Nephthys is? From that sentence alone, do you get an image of her? Do you get an idea of what she could be? And Lelantus teaches dreamers how to fly. It's so many names, but it's giving nothing. We get names like Thea, Weaver of the Future, Xander, Weaver of the Present, Somnus, Weaver of the Past. While they're going through this, Esmer is just being an edgelord about it. I suppose, I said with a sigh, then flipped past Xander, Weaver of the Present, to a man with long ink black hair adorned with a crown of bones. But Somnus is far more interesting. Eden scoffed. What can the Weaver of the Past do? Thea would give us dreams of our future. That's what counts the most. Like what we'll have for dinner tomorrow, Elliot chimed in. Eden's mouth quirked up in a grin. Or who our friends will be. Or our enemies, I added. Who will love, who will marry, Eden suggested. How we'll die, I countered. The thought hung heavy between us, but only for a moment. Blah, blah, blah. I just find it funny that Eden is just an edgelord for no reason. Eden is alive here, obviously. So she still has that curiosity, that desire to go on an adventure. So why is she being a Debbie Downer and so cynical in this? It just didn't make sense to me. I just found it a bit childish how emo she sounds. I also realized one thing here. This back and forth between the siblings, we also see a small sample here of how the conversations between characters don't really connect. I'll talk about it later on once we get to see Shadowbringer and Esmer talking. But here, Eden is trying to be this positive thinker. She's trying to be like, this Weaver can give us our future. It's very beneficial, blah, blah, blah. And then we have Eden saying, or they'll tell us how we die, who our enemies are. And we don't really get a reaction from the other characters. Presumably, if I'm trying to lighten the mood and be positive and everything, and then someone comes in and being an edgelord, I would have a reaction to that. Can you not? But either sibling don't react to this. So it's like, are they listening? Are they actually in the same conversation with Esmer? Are they actually in the same room? Dialogue feels disconnected because it seems like they are not listening and reacting to each other's words. I flipped the page this time, past Ceres, the Earth Weaver, in her emerald forest, and Lelantus, the Air Weaver, on his mountain, to a masked man wrapped in gold, sunlight spinning from his hands. His radiance filled his page with bright, shimmering waves, washing over those who worshipped at his feet. Mithras Atral Tethebrum, our sovereign and holy Lightbringer. The Lightbringer! Elliot exclaimed with a toothy grin. Throughout the book, there's also repetition like that. So many, actually. An idea is put down in a previous paragraph and then it gets reiterated in the next paragraph. It's very hand-holdy, which is ironic because some parts are being spoon-fed to you, but then other lore, other world-building stuff are not explained properly. The next page depicted the 7 Dream Weavers in a battle against the Shadowbringer. It was the final confrontation before the Weavers disappeared and corruption slid over Noctis like a black cloud, leaving the Lightbringer to carry on alone. The artwork exploded violently with shadows, blood, and demonic beings devouring dreamers' souls. The Shadowbringer sat hunched in the middle of the page, teeth sharp and dripping with gore, as he tore apart a Weaver with his claws. Black horns sprang from his skull-like face, framing hideous red eyes. Several questions about this passage. So it names Mithras as the Lightbringer that is part of the 7 Weavers who defeated the Shadowbringer. So that would mean that Mithras is a Weaver. But also we know him to be the sovereign of Noctis. So do they acknowledge the Lightbringer as a god then? Because later on when they interact with the Lightbringer, they treat him as this respected figure, right? But they don't really treat him like a god. They just treat him as this person who has high authority. So again, I'm just confused what exactly the Weavers are and how they are seen by the common people, how they are interacting with the waking world, like the real world, and how they are interacting with the dream realm. And then the dad comes up and tells Elliot to go to sleep, so there is no storytelling that happened. This is a rundown of the names of the weavers and what they look like. It's a lot of nouns and descriptions with no context of their importance in the world. Does being a water weaver mean you can control water? Does their influence affect the waking realm, or are they just confined in the dream realm? Because it is mentioned that they disappeared, leaving the Lightbringer in the waking realm. So like, are they asleep? Did they die? Did they physically leave the waking realm and went to the dream realm? I don't know. And I'm also confused about how Esmer feels about the weavers, because we see her being eager to break the rules, which translate to her either not having a strong faith in the Lightbringer or whatever religious institution that they are part of, or she's not taking the threat of demons seriously. While they were flipping through the book, it didn't seem as though the siblings were taking the weavers as real people, like real tangible people. It's more like they were treating them kind of like characters in a myth, the way modern day people now read about the ancient pantheons. We don't really expect them to be corporeal beings. We don't treat them that way. Same reactions from the siblings. I don't get the sense that they believe in them as real corporeal gods or whatever they are. But then later on, when she comes face to face with the Shadowbringer, Esmer is fully on board with this mythos that the Shadowbringer is the root of the corruption, capital C. We can brush it off as Esmer believing in the weavers after Eden dies, but we don't see that on page. We just see not really respecting, not really taking the threat of the demons seriously, to her just really holding on to this idea that the Shadowbringer is the root of all evil, the Lightbringer is good and the only hope for humanity, blah blah blah. That flip didn't land well with me. It didn't land at all because of this sudden shift. It would have been an interesting character development for her to see her starting to believe the mythology about the weavers. I think the delivery of this lore could have been incorporated better in the scene. It's framed as the siblings telling each other a bedtime story, but there's no storytelling at all. They were just pointing at pictures like, oh, it's Thea, this is Xander, blah, blah, blah. Why not have Esmer read an in-lore epic or an in-lore mythology that explains the world's creation? Why not actually tell the story of how Mithras saved the sea dragon, or how Lelantus taught dreamers how to fly? Like a story within a story, sort of. Bringing it back to the ancient pantheons, we have mythology about Pandora, about the Greek gods. We could have had that sort of story to explain how the world is, and that wouldn't come off as info dumpy. It would be entertaining because we have the lore, the myths. It would make the world feel more lived in, like there's a backstory, there's a history of this world, and it would serve as information for the readers. It's more seamless that way, more natural. And then we go to chapter 2. Immediately after the info dumping, we get a 5-year time skip. I'm not a fan of time skips because oftentimes the characters that are introduced pre-time skip are now different people after the time skip. The character development, or the pivotal point that changed them, made them into a different person, was skipped. It was just off page. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like it. The character development should be seen on page. Those are the interesting bits. One of my critiques for The House of the Beast, where I was invested with the younger version of the protagonist, and then we do a time skip. She's a completely different person, and I lost interest. Anyway, yeah, so we open up in a time skip 5 years later, but then immediately it goes to a flashback to Eden and Esmer as children. And it's just a summary of what they did as children, how they had fun, how they bonded, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, ever since Eden died, Esmer looks at her village and all she sees is bleakness and hopelessness. She says her village is harsh and cloying, like a dead thing left to molder in the rain. them. There are good imagery in the book. Sometimes, though, the descriptions can be too much. That passage I read, that's perfect. But then sometimes the author would add more descriptions. One description is enough. One strong image is enough. And the more adjectives or adverbs you use to add to this imagery, the less powerful it is. Esmer and Elliot are distributing the elixirs. We are told that the corruption is getting worse despite how much elixir was consumed. The villagers are so desperate for more elixirs that people would stand guard overnight in fear of other villagers stealing from them. Esmer's family, they set up traps and the dad would sit outside with a crossbow. Esmer's family distributes the elixirs to the village so they have all the stock in their house. Here, Esmer is talking to a villager as she does her rounds. Here, I said, offering her one of the slim vials in my pocket. It will be enough for 1 week, even when shared. Just a small mouthful is fine. 1 week. Just enough to last them until the Light Legion came with their seasonal distribution, which would be any day now. Two things here, going back to the vials and the mouthfuls. So it's a slim vial that fits in her pocket, so it's not a big bottle. But then she says it should be enough for 1 week. Even when shared, just a small mouthful is fine. There's a lack of specificity in this book that makes the world so detached and not grounded, and it just creates contradictions that just throws me off. This is the introduction of the world. The first few chapters, we need to understand how the world works, what's the baseline of the characters, and what does this universe look like. It fails to paint a clear picture because we have vague descriptions or inconsistencies. What does a small mouthful mean? A mouthful can be a lot. It's not just a teaspoon or something like that. Why not say a teaspoon? And even the dosage is not specific. Just a small mouthful is fine. Like, what do you mean it's fine? Because when you take medicine, they say take 2 tablespoons every 6 hours. Take 1 teaspoon every 4 hours. It's very specific. There's so many small inconsistencies and wishy-washy world building here that it completely distracted me from the story. So this small vial is supposed to hold an elixir that could last for 1 week, shared between at least 3 people, where each person is supposed to drink a small mouthful every night. Like every time they go to bed, they have to drink a mouthful. And I'm just like, trying to math things out. That small vial won't be enough for 1 week between 3 people. Every time you go to sleep, you have to drink. If it's a teaspoon, then yeah, maybe that's enough. But like a small mouthful? And then we have the next part, 1 week. Just enough to last them until the Light Legion came with their seasonal distribution, which would be any day now. And then Esmer starts to leave, but the woman she gave the vial to grabs her hand and asks her for an extra vial. Esmer says no, the rest of the vials belong to the other Noravillian children. She knew this. Everyone knew this. There will be more in just a few days' time. Maybe even earlier, Elliot added brightly. The Light Legion will be here any day now. Several things again happening again with the vague timeline. We get seasonal distribution. What do you mean by seasonal? If you say seasonal, like spring, winter, summer, so that would mean the Light Legion would go there 4 times a year when the season starts? Which would be any day now. Like, what do you mean? Is it the end of winter? Is it the end of fall? Like, which season are we in? And then the repetition of the Light Legion will be here any day now. That's literally what Esmer says. Elliot repeats it a few paragraphs after. You're just repeating the same non-description that was given a few paragraphs. This is giving nothing. This just adds to how flimsy and how vague the world building is. And again, I'm just so distracted about the repetition and the inconsistencies because what are we trying to say here? What is established? It's just that sometimes the Light Legion would come and then they give the elixirs. I get that the idea here is that they are running out of elixirs and the village would have to last until the Light Legion arrives. So I get that the risk there is some people would be corrupted because they're running out of elixirs and they have to hold out until the Light Legion comes. There's supposed to be tension there. But because of this very flimsy time limit, any day now, there's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of the stakes because it's very vague. If, for example, they would say the Light Legion would come in 3 weeks, but you only have a bottle enough for 1 week. That establishes the conflict, that establishes tension, because it plots out that somehow the characters need to hold out for 2 weeks. And it will lead the readers to be engaged in how these characters would live through that 2 weeks where they don't have elixirs. But no, we just get vague things. We don't know how dire the situation is. We don't know what the stakes are. We don't know what the risks are. So it's just a whole lot of nothing. This woman, basically she wants an extra vial to give to her husband who is already corrupted. And when Esmer says no, she threatens to give the one vial that was supposed to be for her and her children to the husband instead. Esmer acknowledges that this was essentially blackmail. She was threatening the safety of her children. But then Esmer agrees to give half a vial to this corrupted husband. This took me out again. This is just one scene, and I'm just taken out so many times. Because Esmer agreeing to this doesn't make sense. The husband is already corrupted, but the wife wants to give him the vial and risk her children because, I don't know if I mentioned, the elixir is not a cure. The elixir just prevents people from dreaming, so you don't go into the dream realm and get possessed. How do you get possessed? I don't know. It doesn't explain. The husband is already basically possessed, and this woman wants to give the vial, the elixir that prevents dreaming. Would that even work? He's already possessed. He's already at the holding cells where all the possessed people are. So why would this mother threaten to not give a vial to her non-corrupted children so she could give it to the father? And somehow this reasoning, this threat works on Esmer? If someone is already corrupted and is in the holding cell, isn't that too late? Do they think the elixir could uncorrupt them? Can corruption be undone? That contradicts what happened to Eden, because Eden had symptoms for a month and no one was able to do anything about it. They couldn't reverse it. From the context clues, I would assume there's no cure. The elixir is a preventative, not a cure. So why would Esmer agree to this? Do the common folk not know what's going on? I don't know. So what exactly do the villagers know about the corruption? Like, do they know that it's incurable? Do they think that the elixirs help uncorrupt people? What do the common folk know? Where do they get this knowledge? Do they have a school? Does the Light Legion send priests or whatever to teach people how corruption happens? And then there's the matter of how the elixirs are delivered. What do you mean seasonal distribution? How long do the villagers have to wait before they get the next supply of elixirs? How much supply are they getting? Because at one point, during the flashback of the night Esmer was convincing Eden not to take the elixir, Esmer wanted to throw out the elixir, and then Eden says that's a waste of a vial. But then Esmer says there are always elixirs. So there is a regular supply of elixirs. There's no fear of running out, except now we're running out of elixirs because people are just drinking a lot of them. If people are running out, do they not have a way to let the Light Legion know and to request an early supply? Everything is just so vague. It just seems like you're supposed to just accept whatever they're telling you. But then in my mind, things are not matching. The math is not mathing. And so I'm just like, taken out of the reading experience. The vague world building does not help solidify this world and fails to establish risks. The world does not feel lived in. It's like painted background. Esmer, Elliot, and Margaret, the NPC wife, they go to the holding cells, which are at the outskirts of the village near the woods. They keep the corrupt there, where they are just screaming for release. And then, every season, the Light Legion would come to purify the corrupt and bury them in simple graves. Again, what do you mean by season? Does it mean the start of spring, summers, fall, winter? Like, do the Legionnaires just go to every village 4 times a year to distribute elixirs and purify the corrupt? So do the corrupt just scream and rot in the holding cells for 3 months until the Light Legion comes and purify them? Do they just pile up in there for 3 months? For special circumstances, is there not a way for a village to call the Light Legion? Where does the Light Legion come from? Do they all all come from the capital? Like, are they all at the capital until it's the end of the season and then they go through all the villages in town in the kingdom? Is that how that works? Do they not have outposts? What is going on? How is the kingdom structured? How are the Light Legion stationed throughout the kingdom so that they are able to respond to corruption in an effective manner? A few years ago, they only had one cell. Now, there are at least 24, and tonight they were full. 24 people just in that holding cell for the next 3 months? Or for the next any day now. It's so frustrating because it's just so vague and wishy-washy. Maybe in the author's mind everything is clear, but the way the information is presented is so illogical. It's so unhelpful. It's just vague, blah blah blah. A few years ago, like how many years ago? After reading the book, I can guess what the a few years ago meant. Because the implication here is it's referring to 5 years ago after Eden died. Why not say 5 years ago they had only one cell? Why all the vagueness? It doesn't really help build your world. And again, a lot of questions. How many years ago did the holding cell expand? What's the average corruption rate? How much of a threat is the corruption? If there was only one cell, then it means the risk couldn't be that high a few years ago. The implication here is that more people are being corrupted now compared to before. So does that mean that the risk of corruption became higher? Because I understand the gist that there's a decline in morale, the village morale. There's more fear, there's more anxiety about getting corrupted. But before this all happened, did they take threats or the risk of corruption as seriously as they do now? Or were they like Esmer, who did not really take the threat too seriously, or not serious enough that she can risk trying to dream? I wish the corrupt had more creepy traits, like climbing the walls, walking backwards, turning their head 360 degrees, like a proper possessed person would. But no, they just have odd sleeping postures, like they sleep in weird angles, or they stand stock still with violence in their eyes. And of course, the one sure sign that someone is possessed is they all had shadows under their lashes. All seemed distinctly other. That's like describing me when I'm running on 2 hours of sleep. It's not distinct. What do you mean they all seemed distinctly other? Weird positions for sleeping is not that weird. Standing stock still with violence in their eyes, like, what do you mean? Be more specific. There's a trend or popularity, I don't know, there's a pattern. This kind of writing, specifically, I notice in romanticies where they have violence in their eyes, they have heat in their eyes, which are not really describing anything. What does violence in their eyes mean? Be specific. Are they glaring at are they looking out of the side of their eyes? Are they frowning? It might seem like it's poetic, but it's giving nothing. Descriptions like this rely on the reader's imagination more than the author providing the description. Like, instead of painting the picture, you would say there's an apple, and then the reader would imagine an apple because they know what an apple is. It's kind of like the same thing. Sentences like this rely on the readers to fill in the information. They have violence in their eyes. The reader, like, whatever they interpret as violence in their eyes, then that's what they look like. But when you really look at the words, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't describe anything. Right? For example, I would say, imagine a circle. What color did you imagine the circle to be? How big was it? So I'm relying on your imagination to create this circle. But if I say a blue circle, then you'll picture a blue circle because I'm providing that description. You know what I mean? Also, it's just ironic how it says they all seemed distinctly other without really describing what makes them distinct. Isaac was chained to the wall, but he had enough leeway to slowly slide to the bars. Margaret greeted him warmly, brushing the ratty, sweat-slick hair from his forehead. That's good. See, it's specific. It's ratty, sweat-slick hair from his forehead. That's good imagery. I can picture what's going on. But then we get to the next part. As though he was still her husband and not a demon. A cloudy substance dripped from Isaac's eyes, mingling with a thick, fleshy fixative that covered the upper half of his face, making the skin appear fractured in several places. I don't know what to picture about that. I don't know what it's trying to paint here. What cloudy substance? Does it look like milk? Like sap? Some other type of white substance? Like, what is the fleshy fixative? Glue? Do you mean like when you put glue on your hand and then you let it dry and then you peel it? Is that what it's trying to say? It's not just this section. The descriptions throughout the book are like this. So many words, so many nouns, adjectives, adverbs, whatever, but there's no distinct imagery that is being created. The image are ambiguous and often don't make sense. Is Isaac's skin peeling off, like shedding, like a snake because of the demon? Well, apparently not. What this section is describing is concealer. I try to conceal the shadows so that he doesn't scare the children, Margaret whispered, pulling a brush and a small tincture of flesh-colored putty from her skirt pockets. Concealment, because elixir would be futile. Corruption had no cure, just as the shadows on his face couldn't be scrubbed off. Okay, several things. That fleshy bit was just cakey concealer, apparently. And then we have confirmation that Esmer knows that elixirs are not a cure. Elixir doesn't cure the corruption. So why did she give the extra vial to Isaac? Why did she allow that when she knows, because everyone knows, that the other vials are for the other villages? Is this supposed to frame Esmer as this compassionate person? If so, it falls flat for me because it just makes her decision illogical. It just makes her look dumb. She knows other people need the elixir. She says that internally and out loud to Margaret. But now she's like, that's a waste of an elixir. Well, you allowed that to happen. And this is why I say Esmer is not allowed to have critical thinking. Because if she was allowed to have critical thinking, none of the scenes would work. The plot would not go as the author intended if Esmer had critical thinking. Elliot immediately sat with the children, entertaining them with the tale of Lelantos, the air weaver. It was a delightful story, but it twisted an unseen knife in a soft, vulnerable part of me. Before Eden's death 5 years ago, I had enjoyed reading about the weavers. It had seemed possible that they would one day return from their centuries-long absence, making everything right and true, that they'd save the world from corruption and rid us of the Shadowbringer and his demons. It was difficult not to flinch as Elliot finished the story. I didn't want to hear a tale from our kingdom's perfect past, not when the present was dark, twisted, and haunted by the ghost of what it used to be, what it was meant to be. Again, we have this vague. Elliot told a story about Lelantos. It was a good story. It was a great story. What kind of story? It's just not only are some of the world building and the descriptions vague, we also have a lot of telling instead of showing. The bane of my existence. I have this ambiguous feeling of how Esmer sees the weavers. So it seems like she does believe in the weavers, but she doesn't have faith in them that they would help. We have more confirmation that the corruption has no cure, and Esmer was kind of dumb for going along with Margaret. It literally says it here. This is Esmer's narration. Because once the demon claimed its victim, nothing could be done. It would feed on its host, slowly and delightedly, one dream after another, until the afflicted mind rotted and its body bore signs of decay. It might take months if one was strong enough to resist, but few ever did. Most fell into corruption within a week. Blah blah blah. Isaac was handed the half vial of elixir. He rolled it in his rough fingers, sniffed the substance, and recoiled violently. He won't drink it. Waste of a vial. Isaac leveled his gaze at me, as if the demon inside him heard. If you know it was going to be a waste of vial, why did you go along with this? And my only solution is that the author needed to show what a corrupted looked like, how they behaved, and maybe to show that Esmer is compassionate. That night, Esmer has dinner with the family, and we are told several things. First, Esmer thinks giving Isaac an elixir was a waste of vial. Her internal dialogue, it literally repeats waste of a vial. So there's that repetition again. The supply of elixirs is nearly empty. The dad says it's scarcely a week's worth, if that. And Isaac and the others would be purified soon. Who knows when exactly, but soon, any day now. The narration repeats the idea that they are running out of elixir or that they're consuming more elixir than usual. Again, what is the usual dose? What is their regular consumption prior to this weird thing that's happening to them? When was the last time that the Legionnaires gave them the supply? What is the elixir exactly? What makes them run out? Again, we don't know what the elixirs are made of. We don't know where it comes from. We don't even know if there's an actual risk of running out of an elixir. For all we know, it's just this one village who are just consuming a lot of elixirs, and having read the book, actually, it doesn't even make sense. There's an explanation to this, which I will get later on, but that doesn't explain why they are running out of elixir. Third thing that we learned, the Lightbringer can purify souls. To be purified, the person must be alive so that their soul can go to the Maker. If the corrupt dies before being cleansed, their soul would perish and the demon is free to possess another. So that's where I mentioned like there's parallel with Christianity. If you don't do what's that thing called where a priest prays for you before you die, so that your soul can be forgiven and then you can go to heaven, and then if that doesn't happen, your soul won't get blessed or something. It's kind of like that. Fourth thing, Esmer thinks she's just as bad as demons because she forced Eden to dream. To me, this whole guilt that Esmer feels regarding Eden feels flat. One, because I am an adult with a logical mind and they were kids. It was a mistake. Like, they were able to dream for several nights. Like, they had several dreams until the dreams became nightmares. So it's not like the first time they dreamt Eden got possessed. It wasn't like that. It feels flimsy to me that Esmer just blames herself. If we knew the consequences of not drinking the elixirs, if we knew the consequences of intentionally dreaming, I think this would hit more, because we have concrete consequence for Esmer if what she did would come out. Because she's also afraid that Elliot and her family would know that she's actually the reason why Eden was possessed, so she's keeping it a secret. If we know what the punishment is, if we have an example, if we're shown what the punishment is, then this fear of Esmer would hit harder, and this self-loathing would be more impactful. As it is presented at this point, it's just a kid who was curious and maybe got overconfident, and then the bad thing happened. So there's no bigger consequence outside of that. The way Esmer thinks about it, she's so emo about this and so torn with guilt. Like, she's a monster like the demons. Like, relax. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. I mean, her sister died and, probably survivor's guilt, and that's not an easy thing to carry, but at the same time, I just wish there was more depth to this internal conflict. So the last thing that we learn during this family dinner is that the parents are planning to move them to the capital, Istrala. Where is Istrala? I don't know. There's a map. I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't look at the map. I tried to borrow a digital copy, so I got the map. But, listening to this, I did not know. It would have helped to just give a description of how the kingdom is. Is the capital to the north, to the south, to the west? How far is it? Is it like a week's travel time, 1 day travel? Like, what? How, where, why, when. Esmer is both happy and hesitant about this. Esmer wants to leave because of the despair that she associates with the village. Unlike when she was a child, where she was thrilled about the adventure and about the seeing new things, now it's just like she just wants to leave the bad memories. Her hesitation comes from the fact that they are absolvers. They are the ones distributing the elixirs, and she's so hung up about this. To leave Noravelis meant abandoning it, as if the role of absolver couldn't be given to a different family. And again, it raises questions. How does someone become an absolver? What's the process of choosing the right absolver? What are the requirements? Do they apply, or do the Light Legion just assign whoever they think is the best for the job? Who knows? This worry Esmer has about who's going to be the next absolver falls flat because we don't know the limitations. We don't know the constraints. We don't know how difficult or how easy this process is. So we can't really sympathize with Esmer's anxiety about leaving the village, because for all we know, it's just very easy to pick the next one. Esmer is just overreacting about this, or they have to do psychological evaluation, blah blah blah, so it's very hard to pick an absolver, which means Esmer's worry is valid. Without this information, we don't really know. It just ends up as Esmer being dumb again, because why are you worrying about this when the obvious logical reason is that someone else is gonna get picked to be the absolver? The mom actually brings this up, like the Light Legion could take care of that on their own. Like, it's their problem. Dialogue in this family dinner scene just made me more aware of how stilted the dialogue is. It sounds unnatural. When will the Lightbringer come? Elliot asked, stuffing his face with a heaping spoonful of stew. This is very good, Mother. Thank you. Shouldn't be long. And you're very welcome, Elliot. Blah, 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 blah. Her hair was so dark it almost looked black, identical to Esmer's, but Esmer likes to wear her hair loose and unbound. Like several things here. Again, we're bringing up this question. When will the light bringer come? Like to give the elixirs. And again, we don't get a definite answer. Shouldn't be long. Any day now. You're not building tension. You're not establishing the stakes. So why should I care that the Legion has not shown up yet? I don't have any reference or context to anything, so I don't have emotional attachment to anything that is happening. Nothing is grounded, so nothing feels real. It's just a bunch of nothing. And then we get this weird segue about Esmer's hair that feels so irrelevant. Like it just came out of the blue. That's how chapter 2 ends. We go to chapter 3. The same night, Esmer dreams of the Shadowbringer for the first time. It didn't matter that I took the elixir. They came regardless. The short visions, the glimpses of dreams. A beautiful man silhouetted against a raging endless sea. A flash of silver, rot and ruin. A castle of writhing, living darkness. The pull on my skin dwindled, dissolving like smoke. Just as the fog in my ears faded into Elliot's snores and the buzz of an insect under our dresser, I groaned in disgust, fully awake and aware of my traitorous body, and settled back into my pillows. Pressing my palms into my eyes, I focused on their weight instead of something rising sickly sour from the pit of my stomach. I had allowed the dreams to coax me under, willingly let them twist and seduce me like a fool. Okay. Several things. Again, we have the pseudo-poetic descriptions but are actually meaningless. A flash of silver, rot, and ruin. What are you saying? What are you trying to paint? Again, you're relying on the reader's imagination to fill in the blank. A flash of silver, is it like the Shadowbringer's hair? Is it a sword? Is it a crown? What is it? What is rotting and what is in ruins? Like, it's so simple to just say a crumbling castle, rotting plants. Why not say that? Why try to be poetic but give nothing? And of course, we have a beautiful man silhouetted against a raging endless sea. At this point, I just knew that the romance would be insta-love or insta-lust because I groaned in disgust, fully awake and aware of my traitor's body, and settled back into, what do you mean? Is Esmer already attracted to the Shadowbringer when they haven't even met? When the Shadowbringer is just some figure at the corners of her dreams? Is that what's going on? There's several books that I've read that are insta-love or insta-lust. Thinking about that, I realized that insta-love, or like love at first sight, it's not inherently bad. What I don't like is the execution. Because oftentimes, especially in recent romanticities, the love at first sight comes from the physical attraction. It happened in Fallen City by Adrienne Young. And this is where I got thinking about love at first sight and insta-lust and insta-love. That I don't hate the idea. It's the execution that I don't like. Because it's hyper-focused on physical attraction instead of having the characters meet for the first time and establishing a huge impact right away. That's usually how love at first sight works. You see this person, it impacts you so hard that you fall in love with them. So hyper focusing on the appearance, the physical attraction is super shallow. Like, I get it if it's insta-lust and you're like, that's an objectively attractive person, but the way the romantic books use it is love. But no, love and lust are different things. They're not interchangeable. Anyway, after this dream, Esmer wakes up, Elliot wakes up. It's implied that Elliot is also having nightmares, but he denies it. There's repetition of how Esmer feels like a monster again for making Eden dream with her. This would hit harder if we were shown beforehand what happens to those who refused to drink the elixir, to establish the consequences if Esmer's action came to light, as she feared. I did like the next part. Esmer goes out to help her father keep a watch. It's dark, she goes down, and there are descriptions of shadows moving and voices in her head. At one point, she reaches out to take what she thinks is her boots, but then the shadows move. There's eerie descriptions that I appreciated. But whether something is really there hunting Esmer or if it's just her imaginations, it's unclear, which I don't appreciate because I don't know what's a real threat and what isn't. There's already a lot of vagueness in the descriptions, in the world building, and now we're playing with hallucinations and visions, which doesn't help ground the story. Again, everything is just floating in the air and nothing is concrete. Esmer finds her father asleep, so she decides to check the perimeter herself when she hears something, like something is calling her name. And this part, it's very clear that it's real. There's no coyness about if this is a hallucination or if she's actually hearing voices. I like that specificity because then there is a threat. We absolutely know that there's something wrong going on, and it's hinted that she is being corrupted. The mystery is gone. Is it a demon? Is it just a shadow? That teasing is gone, but the creepy factor is still there because now we know that she is hearing voices. Elliot joins Esmer and she gaslights herself that it was just Elliot calling to her. But then Elliot says that their dad is gone. Then they start hearing the bells chiming because remember when I said that they have traps around the house to alert them if a villager is gonna steal from them. So the traps are ringing. Esmer takes the crossbow from the dad's chair, shoots the figure that emerges from the woods. No questions asked. And then it turns out to be her mom, which she is horrified about until she sees the shadows under her skin. I like this part because we are seeing Esmer being active. She's making quick decisions that she stands by, all to protect Elliot. So her protectiveness and love for Elliot shines through in a very genuine way, as opposed to the performative compassion she showed Margaret by giving that extra vial where she just ended up looking dumb. Esmer displays a backbone by aiming the crossbow at her mother and eventually her father and locks him in the cellar. So the mother was acting like a demon, but then there's a moment where she kind of goes back to her usual self, and instead of falling for it, Esmer just stands strong. We are seeing her core principle. We are seeing her being a protective sister. We are seeing her being strong despite the internal conflict that she's having. There's a lot of tension and conflict in this scene. Esmer versus the possessed parents. Esmer fighting herself about having to harm her mom. Like, she already shot a crossbow at her, so she's having internal conflict about that, plus the realization that her mom is now possessed. There's Elliot who is scared, so there's a lot of good things happening in this scene, and I liked it. It made me want to read more. But then we get to chapter 4. Parents are locked up in a cell. Some of the villagers went to their house because Elliot went running to call for help. Now some of the villagers are standing watch to make sure that the parents won't escape. Esmer has ran out of elixir and went to find more, but their family's stash is already gone, so she goes to get a vial from the village supply. Again, I'm just asking the same questions as before. When was the last time the Legion dropped their supply? When are they coming to replenish the supplies? Why are they running out of supplies? There's an answer to that later, but it doesn't make sense. And why do they need to drink more elixirs? Esmer takes this vial from the village supply casually. There's a hint that she feels guilty about it. Not even guilty. There's a passage where it's basically like the supply closet is calling me or something like that. Yeah, she casually just goes into the village supply without much remorse, which is hypocritical after her talk of like, oh, the other villagers need this, blah blah blah. I mean, but I guess she did waste a vial on Isaac. So she finds herself in a dream anyway. I must have been delivering elixir parcels with mother and father. I must have fallen from the cart as we made our rounds. Yes, that was it. They must be so worried. Entirely forgetting I was in a dream, I noticed the whisper of a melody, the only indication of any life beyond trees, mud, and a rapidly darkening sky. If you entirely forgot that you were in a dream, then you wouldn't have mentioned that you entirely forgot that you were in a dream. A group of masked men materialized from the brush, covered in oily fur and the stench of unwashed flesh. They slunk around me, silent except for the muffled panting. Saliva oozed from between their cracked lips, sliding into their fur. Their costumes were terrifyingly intricate. There were no seams in the material. Performers from Estrala, then. If the costumes were so intricate, why are there no descriptions of it? Do they look like wolves? Gorillas, bears? What kind of fursuit are the masked men wearing? The descriptions are so uneven throughout the book. We get flowery prose in some areas and then non-descriptors for others. This is a good example of that uneven descriptions because it happens in one paragraph. So this paragraph describes the carriage of the light bringer. So it describes just one location. We have here bright light fanned out, lapping against polished ivory, decorative gold metal, a small shelf of books, and paintings that wrapped around a domed ceiling. What does the ivory look like? What are the items that are made of ivory? What parts of the carriage are in gold metal? There's also a shelf of books for some reason. How big is that shelf, or how big is that carriage that it can have a small shelf of books? Paintings that wrap around a domed ceiling. What kind of paintings? Maybe the weavers battling the shadow bringer. Are they flowers, symbols of the light, of good? And then we have this next section, which is more detailed. I felt plush velvet against my hands, even though they were bound by ropes. Heard horse hooves and the clink of rattling metal. Smelled honeyed wine, inked paper, and the subtle scent of something deliciously masculine. The descriptions are vivid enough for Esmer to know a scent's gender presentation. So why can't she say what kind of paintings are on the domed ceiling, what kind of items are made in ivory, what kind of items are made in gold, what do they look like? Also, the domed ceiling is weird because this is a carriage. I don't know if that's gonna be... Is that possible? Is that aerodynamic to have a domed ceiling for a carriage? Anyway, it's just a good example of how unbalanced the description is. I get that relevant things get more descriptions, they get more details, but here the juxtaposition is just so apparent because it's just describing one setting. Theoretically, that's the same importance throughout. But why is the first part very vague and then the next one, Esmer is picking up gender presentation just by smelling something? So the furries attack Esmer and she somehow conveniently remembers she's in a dream. We could have had one passage where she falls down, scrapes her palm, and she doesn't feel pain, and that's how she remembers she's in a dream. But no, it just says, and then I remember, I'm in a dream. While she's running, a demon talks to her, saying maybe they're looking for the same thing and that they are alike. Esmer rejects this, of course. She doesn't ask what the demon means by maybe we're looking for the same thing. I mean, why would she? She lacks critical thinking skills. Even if Esmer doesn't ask this out loud, she doesn't think back on it afterwards. Even if you don't trust the demon, right? Even if you don't want to hear whatever they have to say, you'd think for a curious person, she would wonder, even just once, what is the demon talking about? But Esmer doesn't even clock this. She just moves on from it. She doesn't show curiosity about what the demon said. And again, this scene raises several questions. Does the Light Legion teach people what to expect from a demon? Where do common people learn about demons, and what exactly do they learn? What do they know about the dream realm, about the weavers? Because we have books, of course, like storybooks. But what else? Again, there's this vague religious institution that is just in the background. Presumably, they are the ones educating people. The book doesn't establish that integral lore in the world. And I say integral because this informs Esmer's actions. It informs the villagers' actions. For example, Esmer knows the elixir isn't a cure, so that should have informed her decision to not give that extra vial to Isaac. But she's dumb, she's illogical, so she did the illogical thing. I would like more concrete rules about this world so that the stakes, objectives, and consequences are grounded in something real, something tangible. As the book goes on, the more it plays around with what is real and what is a dream, it blurs the lines on what is really happening, and it becomes a confusing mess. The more fantastical the setting, the more important it is to ground the story in the human experience. Otherwise, the story and characters won't be engaging or relatable to the readers. I'll speed things up from here on out because this is where the plot gets muddy. Frankly, I didn't understand what is happening in a lot of the book action-wise because of the non-specific narration and the flowery yet vague descriptions. Also, my sequence of events might be not in order because, again, there's just not a lot of tangible things that grounded me to this story, so my mind just organized the events sense in a way that is logical to me. So I might not be relaying the information in the sequence of how the book revealed them. So I'm sorry about that. Esmer is in a dream. She meets a demon who is talking to her. Esmer wakes up, I think, and the Lightbringer is there. So the Lightbringer basically does this whole performance of bringing out the parents and questioning them. And we have a sort of villain monologue, info dump. So we are told that the reason why a lot of people in this village are being corrupted is because the parents were diluting the elixirs that they are giving to the villagers. It started when Eden died and Elliot was sick, right? Because he was having dreams as well. And the parents were afraid of losing another child. So they started hoarding the elixirs for themselves and giving the villagers diluted versions of the elixirs. I liked this part because it's grounded in the human experience. We have parents who already lost a child, they almost lost a second one, and they're just desperate to keep their children alive. They'll do anything for their children. This is grounded in the parents' love for their child. Where it falls is the idea of them running out of elixirs. If the parents were basically hoarding the supply and were just giving the villagers diluted elixirs, it would make sense that a lot of people would get corrupted because they're not getting the full dose, right? So they end up drinking more and more, which ends up depleting the supplies. But if the parents are keeping most of the supplies for themselves, for their children, then why did their own supply run low? Why is Elliot and Esmer still having dreams if they are getting the actual elixir, not a diluted version? And how does that make people go through the supply quicker? Okay, so I'm guessing diluted versions are not working, so they have to drink more and more. They have to ask the absolvers for more supplies. But why is Esmer's family running out? And if it got so bad that 2 dozen cells are full, 2 dozen cells, so it could be at least 2 dozen people, or maybe there's like 5 people a cell, so it could be more. If we have that many corrupted, why has the Light Legion not visited the village until now? And again, is there not a way for the villagers to call the Light Legion and say, hey, we're having an issue here, there's suspiciously a lot of corrupted showing up, can you help us out? Like, is there not a way to do that? So now that the Lightbringer himself is there, it's just convenient that the next day the Lightbringer shows up. Like the Lightbringer himself, it's not just the Legion, just in time to basically purify the parents and do this whole thing, right? Under the Lightbringer's interrogation, the parents admit all of this. They're doing that thing where it's obvious that they're possessed, like the demon is talking, but then the real parents show up again. Elliot and Esmer, of course, are not happy. They're conflicted about this. I feel for Elliot again because he's just a kid and he's basically hearing their parents confess to say that we basically indirectly caused the corruption of the whole village to protect our own children. So Esmer has conflicted feelings for her parents. She doesn't want them dead, but at the same time, she doesn't really agree as well with like what the parents did. Overall, this is a good moment. We get different kinds of conflict, character versus character. We have, Esmer and the parents. They're conflicting opinions or feelings about what the parents did. We have the internal conflict of Esmer having to basically watch her parents be corrupted and eventually purified. So there's a lot of good emotional things going on. Yet, at the same time, I got distracted by all the other questions, other world building things that are not answered. The Lightbringer says that they'll do the purification in the morning. Esmer and Elliot go back home with some guards. Bizarre pacing because we get high tension and then Esmer goes home and then they go back to sleep. Because we need Esmer to sleep so that they can meet with the Shadowbringer, right? So it's just really, really odd. Kind of like with the night before where they discovered that the mom is actually possessed. High tension, they go to bed, she dreams, she wakes up, a couple of high tension, nice conflict, they go home, they go to sleep. I think this is the second dream that we see. I think this is where Esmer meets the Shadowbringer, the beautiful man with white hair, pale skin. It's the man from the silhouette in the lake. Takes her hand and like forces her to open the door because the demons think that because she is not a demon or she is not from the dream realm, she would be able to free them from this castle, but the door won't open. Instantly they hate each other because Esmer blames the Shadowbringer for all the corruption, for sending the demons, for basically killing her parents and her sister. And Esmer will continue to do so, continue to accuse the Shadowbringer of the same thing over and over again, that he caused the corruption, he is ruling the demons, he is the cause of all these deaths. Except we get several instances where Esmer acknowledges that there is something wrong or like something contradicting what she knows. For example, in this same scene where the Shadowbringer is trying to get her to open the door, Esmer says his imprisonment hadn't helped anything. Corruption still tore across Noctis. Perhaps it couldn't be killed, or perhaps the Shadowbringer's demon army had chased the Weavers away before they could. If the Shadowbringer is confined to this one place, how is he supposed to control the corruption? Why is Esmer not asking this? She just goes on to assume that the imprisonment hasn't helped. Again, she has no critical thinking skills. Because it's not only this part, she also, earlier in the book, when she saw the Shadowbringer for the first time, she says he was painted differently in the history books, more monster than man. I was used to seeing him with red eyes, a bloody mouth, and a hideous beast-like body. From the first time that she saw him in person, right away she clocked a contradiction between what she's seeing and what she was taught. And yet it doesn't register to her to ask more questions. If you've been taught your whole life that this Shadowbringer has horns, he has fangs, and you see him for the first time and it's completely different, I would question the credibility of what I was taught. I can guess maybe that the Shadowbringer is shapeshifting, but I would at least keep in mind that what is right in front of me is different from what I was taught. That would plant a seed in my mind that, you know, something is contradicting here. I'm just frustrated at Esmer because she is noticing these things. Obviously, it's her narration, but she doesn't go that one step further to examine what she is seeing. And then later on, she makes another note about a contradiction between what she was taught and what she's seeing. Dreamweaver tales, along with other histories told within our kingdom, declared that the Shadowbringer prevailed all those centuries ago, suffocating the dream realm with demons and corruption, that he freely reigned, commanding his monstrous armies with a bloody fist and gnashing teeth. And yet here he was, trapped in his own castle and desperate for release. I wondered if the Lightbringer knew this, because if the Shadowbringer was vulnerable, I need to stay alive long enough to tell him. Again, she notes something odd going on, but she makes the wrong connection. She clocked to inconsistencies now. Instead of saying, okay, so clearly there is something wrong with what she was taught. She was taught that the Shadowbringer won, that's why they still have the corruption. But then she is seeing the Shadowbringer really struggling in the castle, like he's trapped, the castle is crumbling, and it seems like his power is weakening or being transferred to Esmer. She is experiencing this firsthand, and yet her instinct is to go to the Lightbringer and tell him about the Shadowbringer's vulnerability. I am just super frustrated at her lack of critical thinking because, yeah, she notes some inconsistencies, but she either ignores them or she makes the wrong conclusion. And I know this is YA. Sometimes the writing is simpler, but this just doesn't make sense. You can still make the plot simple enough for the YA audience to understand while also making it make sense. At the start, the Shadowbringer doesn't really comment on this. He doesn't refute it or acknowledge it. And this is where that flaw of the conversations not really flowing together appears again. Because Esmer constantly accuses the Shadowbringer of spreading corruption. And then the Shadowbringer's answer would be to say, I've been trapped here for 500 years. I want to be free. And it's a cycle. Esmer goes, this is all your fault. The corruption is your doing. You're evil. The Shadowbringer says, I was trapped here for 500 years. I just want to be free. I hate the Weavers. On and on and on. Again, kind of like when the siblings were talking about the Weavers, it's like they're not listening to each other. One is talking, but the other is not reacting or receiving the words. Esmer says her dialogue, the Shadowbringer says his dialogue, they're not having a real conversation, which is so frustrating because the enemy's part is really forced. Because at one point the Shadowbringer says, I did nothing to your family, I didn't do the corruption. Instead of asking follow-up questions like, if not you, then who? What do you mean by that? Esmer just doubles down on her accusations. It's just a way to force the enemies in the enemies to lovers part and to prolong that, which is a waste of time. Instead of repeating this argument, they could have had actual conversations before the romance scene starts. But even when Esmer thinks the Shadowbringer is the root of all evil, she still says he has a certain beauty, broad shoulders or whatever. There's a lot of hyper focus again on the physicality of how tall, how pale his hair is, how this and that, blah blah blah, to force an attraction. Again, I don't mind love at first sight, I don't mind Insta-lust, as long as we know that it's lust and not love, because there is a difference. It's the execution that I don't like. If you are face to face with the person you think is the root of all evil, would you be focusing on how his jaw looks like? Would you be focusing on his shoulders, his muscles? I don't think so. So basically the Shadowbringer wants Esmer to free him. How? He doesn't really say. The thing that they try is to open the castle door. Esmer actually tried to put her hand on the door, but she backs out. She doesn't try to open it because of course she doesn't want to free the Shadowbringer. So at this point it's just Esmer waking up, falling asleep, waking up, falling asleep, and the dreaming, and there's a blurring of what is a dream and what is a reality. I think this is intentional by the author, that they want to reflect how confusing it is for Esmer. However, there is a way to reflect that confusion, that deterioration of the barrier between reality and dreams, but also keep the readers grounded to what is actually happening. There should have been a grounding device to signal the readers that we're in a dream sequence. Like in Inception, we have that twirly thing. If it falls down, then that means it's reality. If it doesn't fall down, then it means they're still in a dream. Or we could have something like that vision in Breaking Dawn Part 2, that fight scene where everyone just dies. The events that happened are so extreme for a teen romance that watching that or reading that, you're kind of doubting if this is actually happening. You have that feeling that, okay, something's wrong. Is this actually happening? So you are sort of subtly signaled that maybe things are not as they seem. They could have done that in Dream by the Shadows as well. There is a lot of confusion of what is actually happening. I looked at the reviews on Goodreads and a lot of reviews say that it's confusing. Like a lot of people don't actually know what's going on, and I think it's because of this. There's no grounding element for the readers. There's no subtle signal to say this is actually happening versus this is just a dream, right? Okay. Yeah, so the parents are gonna get purified. I don't know how they are gonna get purified. So Esmer goes to the dream again, and she is able to control the shadows somehow. This surprises the Shadowbringer and angers him. Like, he says, how dare you use my power? Esmer doesn't really know what's going on. She wakes up. I don't know what's going on. She falls asleep. She meets the Shadowbringer again. They're still having the same fight. The Shadowbringer is trying to coerce or force Esmer to help free him. Esmer says no. She somehow falls into this water, and then there are demons that are gonna attack her. The Shadowbringer walks away until Esmer uses the Shadowbringer's power to banish the demons, sort of. There's some action that have vague descriptions, so I can't really picture what's going on. But the gist is Esmer uses the shadows, so the Shadowbringer's power, to just kind of, I don't know, throw away the demons from herself. And then the Shadowbringer comes back even more angry because Esmer dared to use his power again, and he's coughing up blood and he's like drained now. There's no exploration, or there's no curiosity, there's no motivation from Esmer to investigate more about this. She doesn't try to figure out why she can use the Shadowbringer's power. Like, are you not gonna question it? Are you not gonna research more about that? Why? I think she wakes up again, or maybe she doesn't. She doesn't wake up. I think it's the same dream. Somehow the Shadowbringer traps her in the dream for at least 3 days, where she is kept in a dungeon and the Shadowbringer doesn't really talk to her. Esmer says he can see his shadows outside the cell, and the shadows try to like creep in, but the Shadowbringer basically stays away for at least 3 days. I just wanted to go back to this page, talk more about it. I don't know if you saw the notes that I put, if you're only listening and not looking at the screen, but basically this is the same page where Esmer says, "I shall execute your command. Never." And I thought that was like a bit cringe. Overall, the dialogue sounds unnatural. It sounds like you're still asking me to release you from your castle, a castle that conveniently keeps you isolated from the rest of the dream realm. So that's basically just a blatant exposition, and it's unnecessary because we know that this is what the Shadowbringer wants. That's all he's been saying this whole time. After that, we go lower on the page here. His silver eyes narrowed, a whisper of that cold fury was back. My stomach dropped, clenching in fear. I had been too bold, too careless. This is one of my pet peeves in the enemies to lovers romanticities, because we have this, usually the male character would be this powerful, scary shadow daddy character, and then we have the female character who sometimes they're feisty, they talk back. But then from just one sign of intimidation, Esmer flips. She went from this sassy, cringy line, "I shall execute your command, never," to "please don't hurt me, please spare my soul." It's just so jarring. There's no space for that emotional beat to shift. It just makes her character confusing. The strongest characterization of Esmer so far is when she protected Elliot from the parents, where she pointed the crossbow at her parents and actually shot her possessed mom. That was her peak. We very clearly see her character as this loving big sister come out. But now we're having a mix of her being sassy, only to 1 second later be cowering in fear. Like, which is which? She starts bargaining. She'll do anything for the Shadowbringer to spare her soul. Shadowbringer says, "Just your soul, not your family's, your friends, your lovers? How selfish to beg for yours alone." I swallowed. A lover's? That feels so unnatural to me. Basically, at this point, Esmer still thinks that the Shadowbringer is evil and that if he is out in the world, he'll go on a rampage. But now she's asking to be spared. The Shadowbringer points out, "Oh, just you? Like, how selfish of you." And her takeaway is that a lover's? Like, out of all the things that he said, for me, I would not isolate like a lover's. Why is that so important among the other things? Why is the lover's a standout to you when he's saying like you're not gonna save your family's soul or your friends or your lovers? Like, and I think it's just a way to bring focus on the romance. But it's so out of place. It's basically the author pointing out, okay, this is a romance beat. And then of course, after the Shadowbringer points this out, her guilt about Eden comes back. And she corrects herself. "Oh, not just mine. There are 4 others." Like 4 others. I actually like the Shadowbringer's points here because he is pushing Esmer. He's wanting to get a rise out of Esmer and kind of like poking holes at her flawed beliefs. He says, "Would you let your kingdom's villain roam free in exchange for the 4 souls that you want to save?" I like that he points this contradiction out because Esmer thinks he is evil and yet she is willing to bargain for her soul and the people she cares about, like the 4 people. In exchange, she'll free the Shadowbringer and let him loose to the world. And if it would have been better if Esmer thinks about that. She doesn't self-reflect. She doesn't look at the information that she already has and compare it to the new information that the Shadowbringer is giving her. She doesn't realize that what she was taught by the Weavers and probably by the Lightbringer and the Light Legion is wrong. She doesn't think that it's contradicting what she is experiencing now, what the Shadowbringer is telling her. I'm not saying that she should believe the Shadowbringer, but I'm just saying she could at least acknowledge that there is conflicting information. She could at least try to find out what is the truth. But no, instead, she jumps to a more illogical conclusion where she now thinks she can warn the Lightbringer about the Shadowbringer being trapped in the castle. Esmer pretends to take the deal. So she says, perhaps I should set you free. But actually she's thinking that she would just buy time until Mithras can find the Shadowbringer and kill him. Esmer says she has to go back home for now. She asks how much time has passed. Does dream time correlate with reality? If there is a correlation, this castle confounds it. When you wake up, it's possible 1 hour will have passed, or perhaps 1 year. He stalked forward, leaning over me. Maker, he was tall. But that shouldn't matter. because I will not grant you the gift of going home. This room anchors you. You shall remain contained in this castle until you free me. Okay, so several things in this paragraph. First, we have another vague time limitation thing. I basically expected that time works differently in the other realm. That's how other realms usually work in fantasy books. But this unclear correlation doesn't help the world building. Kind of like the any day now. This is again vague. Like, how does it work? Like, what do you mean it could be 1 day or it could be 1 year? If the book said time is not linear, then that would make more sense. I think that would explain things better. Time and space are interconnected at any point. Kind of like that scene in Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey. Is that the actor? Where he goes back in time, quotation marks, pushes to the books, and stuff like that. Yeah, if the Shadowbringer said time is not linear, then I think that would be a better explanation than saying it's possible it's 1 hour have passed or perhaps 1 year. That just reads like the author doesn't know the specifics of the world that they built. These vague explanations just poke more holes in the world building. And then we have the second part of this paragraph. Maker, he was tall. This is not the place and time. This attraction to his physical form is so out of place. She doesn't trust him. She hates him. She is disgusted by him, despite the Shadowbringer's explanations or despite the contradicting information that she has so far. She hates this guy. She's disgusted by him. And yet we have this random romance points. And it's just so tiring. If you want to do enemies to lovers, then you really have to commit to the enemies part first and then have the characters talk or connect to each other emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, not just physically. They have to have a genuine connection with each other, and then we can shift to the I don't trust him yet, but he's not like I thought he would be. He's surprising me, what I thought of him is not actually the reality, blah, blah, blah. And then we can move to them trusting each other more, and then we can go to the lovers part. We can't do enemies and lovers at this. Well, actually we can. But that's a different dynamic altogether. But if you're doing enemies to lovers, we can't have them enemies and then having the attraction for no reason. I'm just tired of that. Maker, he was tall. Okay. Shut up. Okay, but at least we do have this recurring plot point of how Esmer is controlling the shadows. The Shadowbringer tries to attack Esmer, but the shadows stop before they can hurt her. The Shadowbringer, rightfully, is very frustrated and surprised about this. He constantly asks Esmer, how are you doing this? How are you controlling my power? And yet Esmer doesn't reflect on the fact that she is using the Shadowbringer's power. There's only one point where she does acknowledge this. It's only to bring up her guilt about what happened with Eden. Like, I'm a monster. Of course I have shadow powers. I'm a monster because I forced my sister to dream. She also mentions that she would use the shadow magic, like she's willing to use the shadow magic to protect herself, but she doesn't, only because maybe Lord Mithras was watching the dream. That's it. She just somehow accepts that she can do shadow magic. Esmer wakes up. Or does she? See, this is where I got so confused while listening to the audiobook, because there is a lot of Inception-like scenes going on where Esmer would be in the castle, so that means she's dreaming, and then she would wake up, but then she's in another dream because she's seeing Elliot and the stuffed toy, and she realizes she's in a dream within a dream. And then she wakes up, either she's back in the real world with the Lightbringer, or she goes back to the castle. It's just jumping around so much between dreams or dreams within a dream or reality. The presentation itself is not confusing because you can sort of tell within a few paragraphs or a few lines which is it. If you're just listening or reading through it, the constant jumping around is very jarring. It's very confusing, and it messes with the pacing and the timeline of the story. The pacing, because it seems like so much is going on, but at the same time nothing is going on. It's just easy to lose track of what is what. So this would be the 4th day of her being in the dungeon. Except now her surroundings start to change. It looks more like her home. The Shadowbringer comes in asking what she's done, how she's doing this, because basically Esmer is changing the environment. It's unclear if she's changing the castle itself or if she's shifting them into a dream, because there's a thing called dream walking. The Shadowbringer says, what you've accomplished goes against the laws of my castle. How? He tore his eyes from the flower, dropping it. How did you do this? I crossed my arms, distrusting the hint of genuine wonder in his question. I'm not telling you that. Okay, just one thing here. The Shadowbringer grows wings and he somehow is surprised about that. Like, is he surprised that he has wings? Is he surprised that he can move them? What's going on? The Shadowbringer takes to the sky, he flies around, and he says that Esmer's world is little, which ties into Esmer's previous desire to leave the village and have some adventures. Going back to this line, I'm not telling you that. Like, what do you mean? Do you even know how you're doing things, or are you just saying things now? Esmer's character is not distinct for me. It's not grounded. It seems like her personality changes depending on what the plot needs. She needs to be sassy with the Shadowbringer, then suddenly she's not afraid of talking back. The plot needs her to bargain with the Shadowbringer. She's suddenly scared and will do anything to save herself. It's very back and forth. And I'm not saying that she's not allowed to change or she's not allowed to have multiple emotions. I'm just saying the way her behavior changes is too quick. It's too back and forth for what is going on. Like, there's no setup for a beat. There's no beat for her to change. She just flips one way or another depending on what the plot needs. The Shadowbringer grabs Esmer and he says, "You will not wake up now. Let me see what you know. Show me your world." We do another shift. When I first read this, I thought that they were transported into the real world, but no, they were doing a dream walking thing. They're in the village, like the actual village, and Esmer's house is burning. The villagers are burning. Esmer thinks this is real. The Shadowbringer says, no, it's like a version of reality. It's like half dream, half real. My question is, if the Shadowbringer can do this, like basically astral project into the real world, why didn't he do that before? Or was he not able to do that before without Esmer? Why is he able to do it now that Esmer is there? Because he does say later on that this is the first dream walking he did in centuries. Was that by choice, or is there something about Esmer that makes him able to dream? Second, so they astral projected into Norovelis, and the Lightbringer is now doing the purification ritual. So the Lightbringer has this staff or item that makes a certain kind of smoke, and that smoke kind of blurs the line between the waking realm and the dream realm. How? I don't know. But my point is that why the Shadowbringer was able to dream walk into half reality? If so, then it's just so convenient that the Lightbringer is doing the purification ritual at the same time, right? Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of plot points and lore that are not connecting properly. They're not flowing properly. And a lot of the plot is convenient. Anyway, they manifest into the real world. The Light Legion and the Lightbringer sees them. Esmer thinks Elliot and her parents are dead, and she uses the Shadowbringer's power again. She doesn't know it at this time, but everyone there sees her wielding the shadows. And again, we have this random romantic point coming up. Something snapped in me again, a familiar pulling in my ribs. Only this time, instead of connecting me to some power out of my reach, it connected directly to him. I don't know what makes her say this, but yeah. The Shadowbringer turned to face me, eyes wild. Part of his neck was left exposed by his helm, his hair curled damply against it, melding with the soot that marred it. My attention drifted to his mouth. A smudge of ash was underneath his lower lip, all but enticing me to wipe it off. And his eyes, shadows swirled in them, eddying between darker and lighter variations with every breath. They reminded me of stars, depthless constellations I wanted to get lost in. And Maker, he was so tall. Powerfully built and capable of great, terrible things. He is beautiful. The thought surged up, unbidden, and nearly made me buckle. Again, he asked, alarmed. How are you able to call on my power? What are you? I'm not a monster, I snapped, finally releasing some of the pent-up emotion that I had been holding on for days. Don't take me to be anything like you, demon. Enough! He held me by the shoulders, pinning me to a tree with a grip of iron. His sphere of shadow released its hold, falling back and blanketing the scorched, ruined land around us. He wasn't beautiful. The Shadowbringer would never be beautiful. I don't know, like, do you guys get what I mean? Where the romance is just so out of place. Pacing is off. Like I said, they are in the middle of getting attacked by the Light Legion. This is not the time and place to wax poetic about his eyes and his mouth and his skin or whatever. And then we have another disjointed dialogue. The Lightbringer is once again asking Esmer how she is controlling his powers, and Esmer gives a non-answer. I'm not a monster, don't take me like anything. Like, that's not an answer. Why not just say you don't know? The shadows are reacting to you. And then the Shadowbringer cuts the conversation off by saying, enough. The dialogue don't seem to flow well. It's not connected. There's actually another part where basically the conversation was like, for example, the Shadowbringer would say, I lost my glasses. Can you help me find my glasses? And Esmer's response would be, I don't need glasses. That's the energy. It doesn't make sense. It's non sequitur. It's not just this part, it's throughout the book. And then we have this passage where Esmer's just thinking of how she hates the Shadowbringer. He's never going to be beautiful. He controls the demons and blah blah blah. The tales had falsely professed his eyes to be red and his body fiendish, but he possessed many features that made him cold and cruel nonetheless. Enough, he repeated, the color fading from his eyes, his lips. Please. He looked at me with wild desperation, but I couldn't stop. The shadows roared. You're a demon, a devil, a monster, I screamed. This book really needs to normalize they said, he, she said dialogue tag. Not every dialogue tag needs to be I screamed, I shrieked, I shuddered. Like, saying said is fine. It doesn't have to be dramatic all the time. Like, if all the dialogue tags are like this, the book just feels overly dramatic. You killed my sister, you killed my parents. Basically what she's doing here is she's pulling more power from the Shadowbringer, and that weakens him. Now the Shadowbringer is just begging for Esmer to stop. Again, there's this flip of their power dynamic. Suddenly Esmer has the control. Shadowbringer is suddenly begging. From what I know of his character, from how he spoke to Esmer, I feel like him begging is out of character. I think for him it would make more sense if he says something like, you don't know what you're doing, you're playing with things that you know nothing of, blah blah blah, instead of him begging for her to stop using his power. That's just from what I know of his character. Emptiness ripped at my stomach, cleaved my heart in two, laid bare the space where I had a family who loved me and a home that protected me. Mother and father, no longer corrupt. Elliot, safe and without tears. A future and hope for a better life. Without realizing it, I closed my eyes. I was screaming, sobbing, begging. For what? I didn't know. For this vision to be alive, for the Shadowbringer to end it all. And the dark roared louder. I don't know what's going on. What do you mean the dark roared louder? There's a lot of internal things going on with, metaphors and a lot of this imagery of the dark roared louder, but at the same time I don't know what to picture. There's no strong sense of place. When the chaos settled, the shadows dropped, circling the ground in a low-lying fog and leaving the Shadowbringer and me exposed. To my disgust, he was still holding my shoulders, and I was unintentionally leaning on him, face pressed into his armored chest. A quick shove sent him sprawling. He'd been drained of his shadows, which were now scattering to the wind and skimming the grass instead of returning to his body. When did she lean her head on the Shadowbringer? The actions, the locations are not grounded. There's a lot of internal things going on and a lot of descriptions and metaphors about said emotions, but it's all happening in this void. If you're watching a play, it's just a black background. There's no painted background, there's no props, it's just nothing. Every time they're described to be standing a certain way or they're described to be in one location, it just takes me out because I'm like, when did they move? When did they get to that location? When did Esmer lean her face on the Shadowbringer's chest or whatever? Like, when did all that happen? All this, right? This happened in front of the Lightbringer, in front of the Light Legion. The Lightbringer thinks Esmer is a traitor, that she's working with the Shadowbringer, and they capture her. So the Shadowbringer and the Lightbringer see each other. They get into a fight, but both of them get bloody. Esmer is just trying to get out of the way. Elliot is somewhere, I don't know. And then the Shadowbringer disappears. Esmer gets captured by the Lightbringer, and then she's in a dream again. If you are wanting to read this book, I would suggest reading the text instead of listening to the audiobook, because I think listening to the audiobook would add more confusion. There's already enough confusion in the book, in the narration, like the words themselves. So I think listening would just add to that. I think Esmer wakes up. The Lightbringer is there. She and Elliot have been captured by the Lightbringer and they are going to the capital, Istrala. The Lightbringer is not happy with Esmer. He's very suspicious of Esmer because everyone basically saw the Shadowbringer appear together. So the Lightbringer thinks they are working together. Esmer says, no, I hate him. I would never work with him. He forced me to do this, blah, blah, blah. The Lightbringer doesn't really believe her, but the Lightbringer uses this chance to have Esmer spy on the Shadowbringer, sort of. He basically extorts her to say, help me defeat the Shadowbringer and maybe I'll pardon you and maybe I'll give Elliot a good life in the capital and train him to be a legionnaire. Esmer agrees to this, not only because she doesn't have a choice, but she actually believes that she needs to defeat the Shadowbringer, and the only person who can do that is the Lightbringer. They are traveling to the capital, right? So on the way there's this part where she's tied up at camp and the two legionnaires, Silas and Mila, they go to talk to her and try to sort of soften her, I think. The gist is, I think they're trying to convince her to help the Lightbringer to defeat the Shadowbringer. There's a bit of suspicion from Silas, but they are the only ones who are willing to approach Esmer. And then Esmer's dreaming again. She's having the same fight with the Shadowbringer. The Shadowbringer is still trying to get Esmer to help him. He promises to protect Esmer and Elliot from the demons, from the corruption, from everyone else, as long as Esmer helps him get free and he gets his revenge on the Weavers. Esmer says no because she doesn't have critical thinking. She doesn't question anything, basically. She doesn't ask for explanation. She doesn't challenge the Shadowbringer's claim. The Shadowbringer says, I didn't do it. If not you, then who? What really happened? You would challenge his claim and make him tell you his version, but no. Esmer just says, I'm not gonna help you. I'm gonna help the Lightbringer destroy you. The Shadowbringer is still trying to convince Esmer to help him. He actually brings up a good point and asks Esmer if Lord Mithras showed mercy after seeing her and the Shadowbringer together. He pokes hole at her beliefs. Esmer doesn't really have an answer to this. She just doubles down. Esmer doesn't reflect on the fact that the Lightbringer was ready to execute and punish her for just appearing side by side with the Shadowbringer. She tried to plead innocence, but the Lightbringer really wasn't believing it, and the Lightbringer basically coerced her to help him, blah blah blah. There's no realization that maybe there's some truth to this because the Lightbringer was really harsh on me. He didn't really show me mercy, so maybe I shouldn't trust him. That kind of thing, right? There's nothing of that. Yeah, Esmer says, no, I'm not gonna help you, but Shadowbringer tells her to find his tomb. He shows her. He basically says, over that hill, my tomb is there. Find me, wake me up, and I will protect you and Elliot from the demons, from the corruption, from everyone, as long as you free me and I'm able to get my revenge. Esmer wakes up and tells the Lightbringer about this tomb in an attempt to be in his good graces. She's thinking the Lightbringer can give Elliot a good life. They can train Elliot as a legionnaire. So Esmer tells Mithras about this tomb, and Mithras says, take us there so we can defeat the Shadowbringer once and for all. So Esmer does. Initially, she has a couple of difficulties finding the tomb, but she has this sense, a general sense of where the tomb is. Eventually, they get there. Esmer wakes up. Again, it's just back and forth, like awake, dreaming, blah, 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 blah. Esmer wakes up. Everyone in the camp is asleep. There's some magical sleeping spell that's happening. Esmer follows this feeling that she has, and it takes her to the front doors of the tomb where the Shadowbringer is. He's at the front. He's just waiting for Esmer to show up. Before they could talk, Mithras shows up and a couple of his legionnaires. Mithras, he grabs Esmer, and Esmer says it burns. It feels like she's burning, but when the Lightbringer removes his hand, she's not burnt or anything like that, but it hurt her. But he hurt her. The Shadowbringer and the Lightbringer fight. Again, I don't know, but then they're both bloody, and at some point the Shadowbringer, how many times have I said Shadowbringer? not as much as the book. Erebus gets the upper hand. They're moving, right? They're like having a battle, and then Esmer is at the corner watching this happen. At one point, Erebus goes in front of Esmer, so his back is on Esmer, and Esmer uses the shadow to trap the Shadowbringer, pushes him with the shadows. Erebus is on the floor. Esmer made her choice. She helped the Lightbringer, and then suddenly more legionnaires show up. Silas shows up. He's carrying a sleeping Elliot. While the Shadowbringer is basically subdued, Mithras suddenly says sorry, and then light explodes from him, kills his legionnaires, except Silas, who is behind him. Silas carrying Elliot. The first time I listened to this part, I thought Mithras exploded himself, sacrificed himself, because of the wording. So I thought he exploded himself to take out the Shadowbringer with him. But no, light exploded from him. The light burnt everyone to ashes. Those who didn't get burnt got cut down by his sword. Esmer is surprised. I was not, because the Lightbringer was suspicious the whole time. We get an info dump. Mithras reveals that Erebus, the Shadowbringer, keeps the demons trapped. So the Shadowbringer needs to be trapped in the tomb so that the demons would be trapped with him. If the Shadowbringer is free from the tomb, then the demons could scatter and the corruption could get worse. For some reason, the Shadowbringer's power is weakening. Why? I don't know. Why now? I don't know. The power is weakening, which is why there's more demon activity lately. Mithras says from the moment he saw Esmer, he knew that she had the same ability, the same magic, and he knew that Esmer could somehow amplify the Shadowbringer's power. At this point, it's very convenient. It's very out of the blue. There is an explanation sort of at the end, but it came too late. We should have had that information first, like a hint of that information. So when we get this part, we kind of can connect it. Oh, maybe it's that thing that happened before. But no, there's no explanation. He just says this. We're told this, this, and this. We're supposed to take it at face value. So Mithras seals Esmer in the tomb and takes Elliot with him. Esmer and Erebus now have to seal the demons. They can share the responsibility now. I'm not surprised that Mithras does this, because he was suspicious from the start, from the very fanatical, your souls need to be purified, or you are corrupt by dreaming, blah blah blah, is very religious fanatic. I wished that the Lightbringer had more credibility, actually. Esmer trusts the Lightbringer, or if she doesn't trust him, then she hates the Shadowbringer enough for her to side with the Lightbringer. So I wish he had more credibility. I wish his desire to defeat the demons and keep the corruption contained had been focused more, have been played up more. Make him charming and make him this character that really stands against the corruption. That way, we believe Esmer has valid reasons for trusting him. If the readers are shown that the Lightbringer is a bit suspicious, but then we have the POV character fully trusting him, it just feels like the POV character is dumb for not seeing the red flags. Similar to my critique for To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods with the Anthony situation, I wish as the readers we understood what Esmer saw in the Lightbringer. I wished we understood, we saw why she trusted him. That way the readers could in turn trust the Lightbringer. So when this twist comes, it's more of a shock. Again, several things that I don't understand about this scene. Mithras says he doesn't want anyone to know about the tomb. So that's why he killed all his legionnaires. Of course he knows, because apparently he is 500 years old. He's one of the weavers, so he knew about the tomb from the start. So the question is, if he didn't want to let the legionnaires know about the tomb, why did he make this show of marching his army to the tomb? Second, why did he wake up the legionnaires to confront the Shadowbringer? Because they were put in a deep sleep. Maybe he woke them up because he needed backup. He knew then that he was gonna sacrifice them. Or maybe he knew that maybe the Shadowbringer would kill them. Is that it? that doesn't make sense either, that he needed backup, because the Shadowbringer can step out of the tomb. He can stand at the entrance, but he can't go past a certain point. Esmer and the Lightbringer has the upper hand still. He wouldn't need the backup then, right? I'm assuming, because he is a powerful Lightbringer, possibly one of the Weavers, possibly a god. So compared to someone trapped in a tomb for 500 years, he's more powerful. So why would he bring his legionnaires only for him to say sorry before killing them all? Why not just sneak out the way Esmer did and confront Shadowbringer with just the three of them? Because he planned to leave Esmer in that tomb anyway. He planned to seal it there. So he could pass it off as the Shadowbringer, put a spell on them. They all fell asleep and then they woke up. Esmer is gone. And then he could blame Esmer as the scapegoat to say, oh, she was playing us all along. She's actually in cahoots with the Shadowbringer all this time. It won't be an issue about keeping the tomb a secret because Esmer and Erebus would be trapped. The legionnaires wouldn't know what happened. So why bring all your men to just kill them? I think this is just for the shock factor. So we can paint Mithras as this terrible person who is willing to sacrifice everyone, and he's kidnapped Elliot now. He's actually a bad guy, blah blah blah. Anyway, Esmer and the Shadowbringer are trapped in the tomb. Esmer still thinks that the Shadowbringer is evil incarnate and still doesn't trust him, despite everything that the Lightbringer did to her. Yeah, so they're still fighting. Instead of using this moment to bond, because they are in the same boat now, instead of using this moment to reach a truce, to say that, okay, the Lightbringers now both are enemies, maybe we should work together and get out of this tomb. There's a moment where Erebus is trying to be comforting to Esmer, and he's like, hey, there's this coffin slab bed thing. Why don't you take a rest? Why don't you sleep? Esmer ends up feeling like drowsy, like she couldn't resist it, and then she falls asleep. And she wakes up in the Shadowbringer's palace. She's alone. Erebus is not there, and the demons are like, where is he? Where is he? Esmer tries to say, like, he's in his bedroom. Don't come near me or else he's gonna come out and kick your ass or whatever. But the demons are not buying this. Again, the dialogue here is funny because the demons, there's just this forced thing where the demons are asking, where is the Shadowbringer? Oh, you're lying. We know that he's not in there. Kind of trying to force Esmer to admit that the Shadowbringer is not there, and it's just too drawn out. We know what's going on. Esmer knows what's going on. The demons know what's going on. Why do we need to prolong this conversation that's not entertaining? It's not witty. It's not funny. It's just drawn out. Anyway, I don't know how long this dream lasts. In the dream world, Esmer spends the time yelling at demons to stay away from her, threatening them that if they touch her, the Shadowbringer is gonna, punish them, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, there's this really weird creature that appears one day, and the creature's like, ooh, the Shadowbringer is not here. You're alone in the palace, blah, blah, blah. And it's revealed that it's Somnus. His name is Somnus, the Weaver of the past. This guy is creepy. I like it. And Somnus, this sort of snake-like figure, long limbs, very slender, really long hair that kind of acts like it's alive or something like that. Esmer would touch the hair and then the hair would move away. Anyway, Somnus gives a lot of hints. He mentions a shadow that's hunting her and Erebus. Somnus also says like, oh, you need a weapon. Maybe you should get a weapon. Somnus gave her a weapon and then he taught her how to store the weapon. The Shadowbringer has a sword that he brings out by doing this. He pulls it out of his palm, which is cool. And Somnus teaches Esmer how to do this. She stores the sword by stabbing her hand until the magic goes in. The magic system of this dream world is not defined in concrete terms. The extent of what is possible is not defined, it's not established. But again, I'm just filling the blanks from other media that I know. This dream world, it reminds me of, like I said, the Fate from Dragon Age and the Dreaming from The Sandman, the next Netflix. In both of those medias, the way that the dream world works works is that it's powered by will and imagination. But yeah, in Dragon Age, your will and emotions shapes the landscape. Kind of like what happened with Esmer when she wants to go home, she misses her family, and then the landscape changes to her village. It's powered by will and emotions, and the dream responds to that and changes according to that. So with that similarity, I just started filling in what else could be the limit and what could happen there. Esmer gets a new sword, and Somnus says, hey, why don't you go try it out? And then the dream shifts. Somnus puts Esmer in another dream. Esmer finds herself in one of Elliot's dreams. So Elliot is dreaming about this demon. Again, I don't know what it looks like. There's a lot of descriptions, but at the same time, I can't imagine that in my mind. When I read a book, when I'm immersed, when it's really good, it's like a movie playing in my mind. But at this, when the descriptions don't make sense, that's when I can't picture anything. And that's like my signal to say that there's something wrong with the descriptions. This shadowy large demon is threatening Elliot. Esmer is there. She tries to protect Elliot, which I think is always sweet. And then eventually some weavers show up. There's Mithras. There is Thea. And then Xander. They're kind of surprised that the dreamers are there, but then they're also like, run along now, you'll forget about this dream. So they erase the memories about that dream, which explains Elliot not remembering his dreams, and which explains Esmer not remembering this dream, which also sort of explains why Mithras knew that Esmer has the same power as the Shadowbringer. So there is that idea of a time loop, sort of. We'll get to that more, but just make note of that. And it's one of the things that I liked about the book. I was interested in exploring that more, but it didn't happen. So one thing about this sword is that when Esmer used it to defend Elliot, she magically knows how to use the sword. So she never trained with a weapon, but because this is a magic weapon, she is infused with instinct on how to use the sword. So convenient. It's also frustrating because she doesn't really use the sword for a significant amount of time. She uses it twice, I think. One to save Elliot, and then later on at the end when they fight demons with Erebus. Along with the sword, Somnus gives Esmer a couple of trivia and a couple of hints. The main one being this shadow that is haunting her and Erebus. The solution is related to this demon that's hunting them. This feels very disjointed because the demon feels like it's coming out of nowhere. Since when was the demon haunting Esmer? I mean, at the beginning, we do get that creepy description when she went out to help her father stand watch. Maybe that could be the demon haunting her. She was hearing voices, but that happened in one scene. I wish we had more recurring dreams or voices like this where it's more concrete that something is actually haunting Esmer. I wish we had more time in the waking world, especially where she is slowly sort of losing her mind, like she is seeing or hearing things, and that slowly makes her more paranoid and makes her believe that she is starting to be corrupted. I think that would have been a great setup to this demon that is apparently haunting her. When was she being haunted? Like, is the haunting in the room with us? Also, the synopsis makes it feel like it was the Shadowbringer who is watching her from the dreams and not this other entity altogether. And after this reveal, like, there's no acknowledgement or the realization from Esmer that to say, okay, maybe it wasn't the Shadowbringer who was watching her all those times that she dreamt that we are not shown, but it's put in the synopsis. Maybe it was this demon. The waking and the dreaming world gets more blurred. Esmer wakes up from this dream with Elliot and she goes back to the palace. So it's like Inception where there's like levels of dreaming. So she was in another level and then she goes back to the castle level. And Erebus is there. Erebus tells her that he was able to take revenge and he now rules the world. Esmer says like, no way. And then the Shadowbringer admits that he was actually joking. This could have been a nice scene. This could have been a funny, cute little scene if they actually had a report going on before this. But no, so it's just odd because why is he suddenly joking with her? they don't have a positive relationship. The times that they talked at each other, they were basically fighting. They have not had a meaningful conversation. So why is he suddenly joking with her? It feels out of the blue. Erebus admits that he planned for Esmer to take his place and he thought he would be free from the tomb after that, but no, they are both trapped. So he ended up just watching her sleep for a while, and then he went back to sleep to join her in the dream. Actually, we don't know this information at this point. We just know that he wasn't able to leave the tomb. The magical seal is still there, and he came back to the dream to find out the solution. They're both in the dream. The castle is crumbling. It's falling apart even more. Why is it falling apart? Is it related to Erebus's dwindling magic? Why is his magic dwindling after 500 years? Why now? Was his magic dwindling slowly from the start, and it's just at this 500-year mark that it can't hold on anymore? Longer? Or was he fairly okay in the 500 years, but now everything is like happening all at once? It's crumbling faster than ever. I don't know. We don't know. We're not told. So at 83%, Erebus basically says we need to get out of the tomb. We need to find a clue, a solution. And the solution that they think of is they need to dream walk and find this demon. Why is that the first thing that he thinks of? I don't know. Were there not like magical symbols around the tomb that anchors the magic that seals them in? What is actually the magic that traps them there? Was it magic that Mithras casted, or maybe all 7 weavers casted? Is there like a magic item or a sigil or, an anchor that generates this magic that Erebus could have seen and destroyed so that the magic spell could be released? How is the curse released? How is the curse maintained? I wish we would have a specificity. I wish we had concrete knowledge of what we're dealing with so that the obstacles, the consequences, the goals, the stakes are clear. At this point, we don't know what's going on. They need to search the dreams to find clues. What kind of clues? I don't know. Something about the demon. Erebus says they only have 3 dreams, like 3 chances before the castle crumbles. Why 3? How is that calculated? If they went dream walking first and then they came back, if they could compare the damage before dream walking and after dream walking, maybe they could say, okay, each dream walk that we do, like 25% of the castle gets destroyed. So we have like at least 3 dreams, 4 at most, before everything crumbles. But no, Erebus just looks around and it's like, maybe we have 3 tries. Again, there's no concrete rules. There's nothing grounding this story. This arbitrary limit doesn't really help establish urgency in the pacing, not only because it is vague, but also because the actions of the characters don't make sense. We are at 73%. We are just now getting to the main plot, the main quest. Erebus initially wanted to prepare, but Esmer's like, now let's do it now because we're running out of time. So they say they are running out of time. But the first thing that they do after they dream walk, they go into this tavern. Erebus tries to question the people there, the dream people, but no one can see them because it's not their dream. They're not originally part of that dream, so no one can see them. Once the Shadowbringer realizes this, he stops threatening the people and just sits down and he eats. And we have this drawn out scene of the 2 characters conjuring food for each other and eating. It's supposed to be this bonding scene where we learn that the Shadowbringer has not tasted anything for 500 years, like he forgot what food tastes like. So he has Esmer create accurately tasting food for him to taste. Yeah, it could have been a cute bonding scene, but it is out of place. This is not the right time at 73% to write a relationship building scene, especially when we just started a time limited quest. This should have been established earlier. Instead of the 2 characters characters fighting over the same thing multiple times. We could have had this scene where they say, okay, we're gonna have a truce, or maybe randomly Esmer gets hungry in the dream, she conjures food, the Shadowbringer sees that, and that's where they, bond over food, whatever. But it should have come earlier. The past scenes, they're just repeating the same old argument without any nuance, without actually building a relationship or changing the dynamic. Now we're wasting time where action should be. We're just wasting time having this drawn out, talking, nonsensical scene. And honestly, them working together should have come earlier. There's just a lot of dilly-dallying in the first 70% of the book. I feel like the plot could have been tighter and cutting down the recycled animosity between Erebus and Esmer. Basically, this first dreamwalking scene is them finding a young Erebus. He's making this show, like he's doing a performance in the tavern and he's collecting food. And then he goes to take the food to his parents. But then when Esmer and the Shadowbringer go to follow the kid, they see him being yelled at by the parents. Young Erebus is doing this whole dramatic scene where it's like, why does this always vanish? What's going on? I just want to help, blah, blah, blah. I guess because it's a dream, right? It's a manifestation of young Erebus's fears. But we have this very melodramatic dialogue where young Erebus literally says like, why won't you love me? On the nose dialogue. And then young Erebus comes out and then he sees a demon. So a demon rises from the lake, tries to persuade Erebus to give himself to him, basically get possessed, right? Shadowbringer and Esmer try to stop this. There's a fight that's happening. The action is not detailed. Young Erebus sees Esmer. Why? It was established that if you're not in the original dream, no one can see you. Does young Erebus see Shadowbringer and Esmer because it's his dream? It's the younger version of Shadowbringer. So is that why he can see the Shadowbringer? But why does he see Esmer if Esmer is not part of the dream? Anyway, the demon eats young Erebus, swallows him whole. Esmer tries to save him, but she gets swallowed as well. They're in the demon's tummy. The term globe or globes gets repeated a lot in this scene. So there's a globe of shadows. It's supposed to mean that young Erebus made this sphere made out of shadows to protect himself and Esmer from being digested. I think that's the gist of it. So Esmer tries to help young Erebus by giving him a pep talk, saying, you're not a monster, you have this shadow powers, but you can use it, for good. It doesn't mean that you're a monster. This pep talk comes out of the blue for me. Because, again, we have not established an understanding between Shadowbringer and Esmer. They do not have a decent relationship. They barely have a working relationship. So for Esmer to suddenly be all, oh, honey, you're not a monster, you're just a kid, this is the power, this isn't you, blah, 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 whatever. It just feels so performative and out of the blue. If we had that food bonding scene way earlier, and if we had more conversations, like actual conversations between them about their trauma, about their past, about being betrayed by the Lightbringer, they could have bonded more and this scene could feel more genuine. Eventually, the pep talk works. Young Erebus explodes the demon, whatever, they get out. And then there's this scene where young Erebus accepts his powers and he starts to make flowers from the swamp. He starts to make trees and grass and everything becomes beautiful. And there's this really nice description of the young Erebus smiling as he creates this beautiful dream. That's one of the scenes that really worked for me because there is concrete details. The descriptions are vivid enough to create this image of Erebus just kind of like, creating flowers and grass and everything nice. So which is good. But then we have this scene where the Shadowbringer is, oh yeah, I didn't say. While fighting the demon, the Shadowbringer got stabbed by the demon's horn. The Shadowbringer broke the horn, but then the demon took his own horn and stabbed the Shadowbringer under the lake. So after young Erebus explodes the demon or something, Esmer describes something like the Shadowbringer is right there. His hair is floating around and he's unconscious, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't realize that they were supposed to be underwater until Esmer says that they surfaced up For some reason, I just thought the Shadowbringer was just stabbed underground, but they're like underwater and they're breathing. And then that's when I realized, oh yeah, they are in a dream, can just choose not to breathe. Esmer brings the Shadowbringer up and he's like unconscious, but the Shadowbringer looks less pale now, like there's more life to him. And then we see that scene that I described where young Erebus was creating this dream realm. Esmer tries to get young Erebus' attention, but no matter how much she calls him, he doesn't see them anymore. Again, why? They were perfectly interacting with each other. So I thought that because the Shadowbringer is there, it's a past dream of Shadowbringer, so technically it's his dream and he brought Esmer, so maybe that's why young Erebus could see them, but now young Erebus cannot see them anymore. What's the logic there? Shadowbringer wakes up and he says something about, it's you helped me. So again, there's that idea of that time loop where current Esmer was able to help past Erebus through the dream. If you think about the Prisoner of Azkaban, where Harry was the one who cast the Patronus spell, but he thought it was his father, that loop that's going on, there's something like that happening here. So it seems like Esmer was able to help the Shadowbringer become a dreamer. The Weavers, I still don't know if they are gods, if they are magicians, or if they are just really powerful dreamers. Somnus says they work for the Maker. That doesn't really explain if they are gods or just powerful dreamers. Or maybe powerful dreamers is the definition of a god. Who knows? The Shadowbringer wakes up, he says, it's you helped me. And then we see Somnus, Dream Somnus, talk to young Erebus and invites him to train in the capital city of... There's a city in the middle of the dream realm. I forgot the name, but that's where the Weavers are. Young Erebus gets invited, and young Erebus, he had a lot of resentment against the Weavers even when he was a kid because, you know, he felt like they weren't helping him, felt abandoned by the Weavers, especially because he had a hard life with his family. This invitation from Somnus makes him forget about all that, and he accepts Somnus' invitation and goes and hugs him. The Shadowbringer tries to stop this from happening, but again, for some reason, young Erebus could no longer see them. They wake up. They go back to the castle. So maybe we're about 75%, something like that. They talk about what happened. Now we have the bonding over their trauma scene. There's still a lot of hesitation from Esmer. She doesn't really fully trust the Shadowbringer yet. She still thinks that the Shadowbringer started the corruption. The Shadowbringer doesn't completely reject that idea. He just says some vague things like, it wasn't me, you know, I didn't cause the corruption, but he doesn't really explain what happened. We find out later on that he doesn't really explain because he doesn't remember. By helping young Erebus, a part of his memory came back to him. I think this is where we learn that he spent his mortal life asleep because he was training in the dream world to become a dream interpreter. Basically, in the dream world, dreamers would go to the city and ask for a dream reading. And that's where the second dream walking takes us. There's a scene where Esmer is just looking out from the palace, from the castle, and there's like a sea, and across that sea is the other realms of the Weavers. So each Weaver have their own realm, which is why I think Erebus is a Weaver himself, because he has his own realm. Does that mean that Weavers come from powerful dreamers? Is that it? You become a dreamer? So normal people can become a god. Yes, you have to be a powerful dreamer, and then you go to get an apprentice, presumably from the Weavers, and then you get more powerful, and then maybe you get promoted to a Weaver. There were 7 Weavers. Where did they come from then? Because they said they follow the Maker's instructions. So did the Maker make the Weavers? Or were the Weavers originally just regular humans who were powerful at dreaming, and then they evolved into this Weavers? It's a very interesting lore. I just wish it was more fleshed out. I do actually love the ideas of the Weavers, the Dream Realm. I like the idea of the Dreamers, of the 7 pseudo-gods who control a domain in the Dream Realm. Again, this is where I'm just filling the blanks by other books that I've read before, because this system, there's a different realm separate from the usual world that is divided into different areas and is ruled by different people, and each domain has their own like powers and everything. I'm thinking of 2 books or 2 series that follows this layout. I wished it was more fleshed out, basically is what I'm saying. Anyway, they do the second dream walking scene, which is them going to the city. Esmer gets a dream interpretation. I don't know the conclusion of this. I don't remember the point. I don't remember what the dream was about. I have a vague feeling that there's some kind of pseudo prophecy that's going on. I just don't remember what it said. I don't know how the demon manifests here, but I'm gonna assume that they defeated the demon here again because more of the Shadowbringer's memories come back. Okay, so they wake up. The Shadowbringer looks more human now, and parts of his armor are disappearing. Esmer can see more of his face now, like I think the bottom lip, like you can see his lips, of course. And yeah, they get to talking a bit more now that they share their trauma and they actually talk a bit more. And then they're doing the third dream. The dreamer has this joking, lighthearted vibe where he's like, do you want to go to a ball? And then we go to the third dream, which is a ball scene. We are at 80%. We are supposed to be at the third and final dream. This is the last chance for them to find a clue. And we have this drawn out makeover montage at 80%, where Esmer's clothes, makeup, and hair are described in great detail. And then we have random people in the dream making catty comments. Why? Like, it's so irrelevant, it's so unnecessary, and it just slows down the already bogged down pacing. There's also repetition. It hammers you on the head. Erebus and Esmer enter, and then everybody's looking at them. But then after that, because they're not supposed to be in that dream, everybody forgets about them, but they still keep getting attention, blah, blah, blah. There's catty comments about Esmer's stress. Who does she think she is to get the attention of the Shadowbringer, blah, blah, blah. It's all irrelevant, and I wanted to DNF at this point, because why are we getting scenes like this at 80% when we're supposed to be in a time sensitive mission? Anyway, the Shadowbringer disappears during the ball. I don't know where he went. But Dream Erebus sees Esmer and goes to dance with her. He's trying to figure out who she is. He kind of gets that she's not part of the dream. Again, why does Dream Erebus see Esmer, but some parts of his dream he doesn't see her? What is the rule? It just seems like whatever the plot needs, that's what happens. There's no strict rules on the magic system. Yeah, anyway, they dance. It's revealed that the Shadowbringer and the Lightbringer were friends because they were working together as dream interpreters or something at the palace. And at this ball, they were also hanging out together. And then eventually, the Dream Erebus leaves to do something. Shadowbringer shows up out of the blue, but he says, I remember now. I remember what's gonna happen. So they follow Dream Erebus. We're at 88%. We get a point of view from the Shadowbringer. And the point of view basically just goes over the entire book, but from his perspective, basically summarizes what he was thinking, what he was feeling during the moments that he interacted with Esmer. This is where we find out that after he put Esmer to sleep to take his place, and then he figured out that he actually can't leave the tomb, what he did was watch Esmer sleep, and then he felt guilty about tricking her, but then he also felt like if Esmer is not here anyway, I might as well join her in the dream. And I was like, since when? Why? Why would you feel this strongly when you've barely had a proper conversation? There's a few mentions of their connection, because remember when Esmer was close and her proximity itself was enough to wake Erebus? There's a hint of that they have a connection. And if this were a Sarah J. Maas book, that means they're fated mates, right? There's something like that going on. So they have a connection, and he'd rather go back to sleep than be awake and basically be alone in the tomb anyway. Again, I wish the romance was just established better and earlier in the book. That way this would hit more. As it is, it's just an eye roll moment. Like, shut up. you'd rather go back to sleep than find a way to take down the wards, maybe look for sigils for magical items around the tomb, break a pillar or something, see if that would turn off the barrier. I don't know. But yeah, no, he chose to go back to sleep instead, which I don't think we even needed, because every emotion, every look, every body language is spelled out. They go to the edge of the lake or the sea, whatever. Dream Erebus is doing this ritual. Shadowbringer tries to stop him because this is apparently what started everything. This is the reason why he was trapped for 500 years. Again, we get the inconsistency of who gets to see who in a dream. Shadowbringer tries to stop the dream, but Dream Erebus doesn't seem to register. Like, he doesn't see them. He doesn't hear Shadowbringer shouting at him to stop. Yeah, it happens. Erebus looks up and he sees the Lightbringer there with the other weavers, and then he's like, this isn't supposed to happen. Shadowbringer and Esmer flee as the weavers start trapping or cursing young Erebus. So basically, we are told that what happened was Erebus and the Lightbringer invited demons to the ball because they have this plan to trap them once and for all. Erebus was supposed to do this magic thing that would summon demon. What is this ritual? I don't know. How did you find out about this ritual? I don't know. Why can Erebus do this ritual? I don't know. I guess because he's a Shadowbringer and demons are attracted to shadows. Anyway, Erebus was supposed to do this, and then Mithras was supposed to call the demons there. Instead, he called the weavers. So basically, in the point of view of the weavers, Erebus was summoning demons, and that's why they trapped him in the castle. How did they trap him? I don't know. What spell did they use? I don't know if it's a spell at all. How did they trap him? Shadowbringer and Esmer flee. They go back to the ball. Again, action is not clear. I don't know what's going on. I just know that they're fleeing. Eventually, they wake up. They go back to the castle, and I think this is where Erebus explains, because at this point he has his memories now. I just wish that he also explained how they actually trapped him. Like, who set up the barrier? What are the requirements for the barrier? If we know the requirements, then presumably we'd know how to take it down. So we'd know what the characters would need to do to break the curse. But we don't. At 92%, we've got Erebus's memories. They got the last piece of the puzzle, which, by the way, I don't know what they needed to find. Because in the 3 dreams, they basically defeated the demon. They tried to help Erebus get back his memories. Is that the key then to breaking the curse? But at 92%, once again, action and plot pauses so that the characters can romance each other. Yeah, I don't know. They love each other now, I guess. And they sleep together, and then they waste time. In the morning, they're about to test the seal, like if they actually broke the curse. But before they do that, they waste more time in bed. And I thought the palace was crumbling. They're in a time-sensitive mission. They only had 3 chances to break the curse. They finished the 3rd one. You'd think after 500 years, Erebus would want to leave the palace as soon as he can. But no, they waste time with shallow romantic scenes. They actually get out of bed and do some work. They now have to try to leave the palace. Oh my god, there's this really cheesy scene where Erebus dons his familiar armor, and then Esmer creates her own matching armor. Their armor, it's like spiky and menacing and dangerous or whatever, and sharp. There's a scene where Gauntlet disappears, so they only have leather gloves so they can hold hands. This is so cheesy. And they have this like the gist of it is like the king and queen of shadows, and they're about to face the horde of demons together. They open the doors. They are surrounded by demons, and they have a brief fight. This is the second and last time that Esmer gets to use her magical sword that magically lets her know how to do swordsplay. Again, I don't know what's happening in the scene. Action scenes are not described properly. Wait, I think I missed a part. 94%, I wrote, intimacy doesn't feel earned because these characters have not bonded in a meaningful way. Romance is shallow and out of nowhere. The conversation they have regarding their past traumas and how they are not monsters should have come before they fell in love. I wrote this at 94%, so does that mean that the trauma bonding actually happened later than I thought? What? So they only slept together after the third dream. And then at 97%, this is the part where they try to leave the palace and they're about to open the door. There's a passage where Esmer is about to open the door and she hesitates. And it says, "An ugly, unwanted part of my mind screamed at me to push him back inside the castle and slam the door." She just confessed her love for the Shadowbringer. They just slept together. This is the part where the Shadowbringer is about to step out. The Shadowbringer couldn't get out of the palace, right? If he tries, he gets burned like a vampire. So Esmer steps out. The Shadowbringer is like hesitating at the door, and then this is where the passage comes in. "An ugly, unwanted part of my mind screamed at me to push him back inside the castle and slam the door." Why would Esmer think about this when she and Erebus already reach an agreement? They already confess their love for each other. Why is she having this thought? You'd think that she's fully on the Shadowbringer's side now. Why would you think this about the person you supposedly love? This is so bizarre. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, why was that necessary? It doesn't make sense. They open the door and then they are actually swarmed with demons and they fight. They do something. Some shadow magic. I don't know why. How? Esmer makes a tunnel from the shadows. They bottleneck all the demons and then Erebus sends this shadow and it hits one demon and then it purifies the demon. So the demon becomes a human. It's revealed that all those demons, all those screaming souls in the castle that they were screaming like, "Let me out, let me out." Every demon was actually the possessed humans. So if a human gets possessed, the demon takes over the body. So the human soul goes to the demon body in the dream realm. The Shadowbringer actually knows the demons that were talking with Esmer throughout the book. They're like his loyal guards or something like that. At the end, Somnus appears and he's like, "Oh, I gathered all the demons for you because I know that this time would come." How convenient. When Erebus was gone and Esmer took his place, all the demons in the castle fled because the Shadowbringer was not there. But yeah, Somnus apparently gathered everyone back to the castle, and it ends with Erebus and Esmer looking at the demons turned humans and them thinking that the next step is obviously to free the other humans and defeat this corruption. At the very end, we get I think it's an epilogue. We get a POV from Mithras. It is revealed that he is possessed by the demon. How, why, when, where, I don't know. But he feels guilty about not being able to protect Esmer and Elliot and Silas and everyone and Erebus as well. Yeah, so that's interesting, I guess, but it's not enough for me to want to read the next book. Gosh. So I rated Dream by the Shadows 1.5 stars. I enjoyed the beginning. I think there was a lot of potential with the corruption, like what's going on there. I did like the idea of the dream realm, of how it works, how they have 7 weavers with 7 domains and stuff like that. It's ironic because this book, it does focus on building this world, but the way the world building was done is so non-specific and vague that it didn't really build a world. It would have been better if it focused on the characters and the relationship between Esmer and Erebus rather than building this world. We're building this world this way, like we have a lot of terms, we have the concepts, but it doesn't go deep. Like we don't follow through the implications of what is said. I wish that the focus was character building. I wish the central plot was the dream loop time thing, you know, when Esmer apparently helped young Erebus before, instead of this arbitrary 3 dream companion quest where they try to find this non-specific clue on how to break the curse. I wish the book was edited more, like developmental editing. That is Dream by the Shadows by Logan Carley. That's it for me today. I will see you next time. Bye.